Okay, it looks like we're live. We're giving everybody a chance to get warmed up here because we're going to be on four platforms at once today. I know there's a little bit of a delay on some of them, so we're going to give all this a chance to kind of catch up. Not often we do streams on, I guess it's Saturday morning. That's the weird thing when you work from home all the time and you're up late editing and whatever. Sometimes you lose track of the days. That's a real thing. I know we joke about it sometimes, but it's actually real. But yeah, today's Saturday, I think. Uh, we're gonna stream for probably, I think, about hour and a half, 2 hours. I think that's about how long it'll take to get through all the cards with a reasonable amount of discussion. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna go down the cards, and if something looks interesting, we'll talk about it. I don't know if I'm gonna talk about every single common, every uncommon, because a lot of them aren't gonna have a lot of weight. It's just gonna be like, this card's interesting, or this card's probably okay in draft. So I'm probably gonna skip a lot of those unless they look particularly unique or different. And then we'll just at the end, if there's something we didn't cover, we can talk about that. If you have questions as far as maybe does this card go into this type of deck? What would I look to do with this card? That sort of thing. Feel free to ask. You can pop it up in chat at any point and we can discuss it. Um, looks like people are starting to stroll in here. We're gonna give it about another minute or two and then we'll get started. Also, while you have a moment, if you would do me a favor and be so kind, remember to hit the like button or subscribe, depending on what platform you're on, just so other people get to see it. That would be great and help the videos out. Also, if you want to join my Discord, links in the descriptions, or if you're on Twitch, you can use exclamation point or yeah, exclamation point Discord. Have to remember what platforms are which when you're on four at one time. But yeah, you can do that. You can join my Discord. We're always talking about Decklist, helping people out with stuff. And if you're on YouTube, I also have a membership level that if you want deck help, I have a special thing set up just for members. You can send me a direct email and then I reply back and we can help you out with some deck stuff you have going on. So lots of opportunities to interact even off camera, which is great. Got a few people hopping in here. Uh, do, 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 do. Mole God discussing and broken. I don't think that's actually true. I do think it's good. I don't think it's broken. Let's see. Wolf Track says, "Thanks, PowrDragn, for great videos. I watch your videos when getting ready for work in the morning." Thanks. I'm glad that works for you. Yeah, one thing too I laugh about, and let me tell you something. This is a peek behind the curtain because this happens a lot. And I'm gonna say this, and you can feel however you want about it after I say these words. Content creators don't care about misplays. We don't. I mean, I see it all the time. People leave it in my comments. People leave it on comments of multiple other people I follow. I see people leaving them even on uh, Commander gameplay videos or whatever. The reality is, one, the video's done. We're not going to go back and redo any of it. Like that's a moment in time that's recorded, edited. Sometimes days passed. We're probably not even playing those decks again. So like putting it in the comments doesn't really do anything. Like first off, the other is if your takeaway from watching the video is you missed lethal at the 5 minute mark or whatever it is, like what does that really do for the creator? That doesn't help them make better content. That doesn't endear you to them. Like whatever. Now I will say this: if somebody's content is predicated on them being a top level player and being a deep strategist and all this, then okay, cool. I guess it kind of makes sense. It'd be the same thing if you watch like a chess master trying to be perfect and give you strategy and then you point out that the strategy doesn't work or whatever, right? Like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But if that's not what they're doing, they don't care. I mean, creators talk about this stuff behind the scenes all the time. Like they truly 100% don't care. You're just wasting breath most of the time. But in all seriousness, if you do want to help a creator out, like comments like, hey, the volume was too high here, or hey, could you show the cards with a clearer background so it's less distracting, or whatever, right? There's things that can really help make their content better and better for you. That those are more worth sharing. Or did you like the deck, not like the deck? Is it your style of video or not? Like that stuff is more helpful generally. All right, looks like people are starting to roll in here on just about every platform now. Thank you for whoever liked the video on Facebook there. I just saw the thumbs up go up there. Also, again, if you're on YouTube, please remember hit the like button. That'll help it show up in front of more people. Gatewatch says, good evening. Well, good evening to you too, Go Gatewatch. Streetwise Lookout is the card I'm most interested in so far. We'll probably talk about that at some point. The murder mystery aspect of the set is just flavor, right? It doesn't have an actual impact on game mechanics. Generally, any flavor for the set, for any set, doesn't really impact gameplay. Now mechanics, like here you have more detectives and you have suspects or whatever, right? So it adds flavor, but we did get a mechanic based around suspect or whatever, but it doesn't really affect gameplay. There's not like you have to solve a mystery during the game or something like that. Let's see. Show me one person that's never made a misplay in this game. You'll have an easier time. I tell people straight up, like, expect there's going to be like 5 misplays in every video I put up, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. If you're expecting me to play perfect, ain't gonna happen. Like, and I will say this, real talk. There was a point in the past, long past. We're talking like I don't know, at least 8, 9 years ago, probably 10 plus years ago, that I did care because I was playing 1 or 2 decks at a time. I was honing them. I was playing all the PTQs. I was playing Star City cash events, all that type of stuff. I got to play in a pro tour, 2 of them actually. Got to play in nationals, right? That it mattered. Now that stuff doesn't matter. I'm having more fun just goofing around, showing off different card ideas. Do these decks even work? Right? That's what I'm doing now. Like, and truthfully, what y'all don't see off camera is half the time when I'm even recording videos, I'm responding to people on emails. I'm helping people out with their content. I've got a cat sitting on my lap. Like, I'm not even giving myself a chance to play perfectly. I have like 3 or 4 distractions going on while I'm working. So, yeah, even if I wanted to try to play perfectly, I didn't set up my environment for that. So there's just no way it's going to happen. That's why I don't worry about it. Like I genuinely am just like, yeah, just not a thing. And anything, I would say this. If the decks work while I'm making those mistakes, that should tell you more about the deck than anything, right? You shouldn't be like, I can't believe you did this. Like, okay, cool. But I missed that play, but the deck still won. You know what I mean? Like, so that means the deck's probably better than we're giving it credit for. All right. Let me get through these next couple of comments and we'll hop into the cards here. One of my favorite things about your decks is not relying on sweepers. Yeah, there's a couple, but generally speaking, yeah, I'll use sweepers when it's necessary as part of the like strategy of the deck, but I'm not going to build a deck with just like 12 sweepers because that's stupid. The crazy thing is playing against those decks and then still winning because I seriously think like those people have to feel so bad that you built a deck that's all about keeping creatures off the battlefield, but yet you still lost to creature attack damage, right? That's those people have to like want to just go bang their head against the wall or something. All right, let's see. Gatewatch says, haven't seen you much lately on Twitch. Are you doing more live streams on YouTube? Nope, I'm just doing them on both when I do them. Davey J, hey, by the way, if you are a member or you subscribe on, or if you're a member on YouTube, you subscribe on Twitch, you do get cool little icons, little emotes like Davey J's got here. I think I also have some set up on Facebook too, actually. Mitch says, I appreciate the content that focuses on having fun. Remember when we used to play games and have fun? Yeah, that's true too. I mean, I think some people take their gaming way too seriously. And here's the reality. Honestly, the overwhelming majority of gamers will never play their game at a professional level. They will never even get any prizes at the professional level. And that's okay. And I'm not talking about just Magic. I'm talking about if you play Madden, if you play League of Legends, whatever, doesn't matter. That's true for literally 99% of all players that play every single game. So worrying about that is kind of silly. Now, if you want to have personal achievement, like, whenever I'm playing not League, I play Teamfight Tactics. League of Legends, that's a whole discussion for another video. But I'm not great at Teamfight Tactics, mostly because I don't dedicate enough time and pay attention to little meta stuff or whatever. But I still go like, oh man, can I get to gold 3? Because that's kind of like my high water mark in that game, right? But I'm not mad when I lose. Like, is it frustrating when I lose like 6 or 7 times in a row and I feel like I'm doing everything? Yeah, of course. It's human nature. But I'm not gonna sit there and get angry over it. There's nothing at stake. I'm playing for free. It's literally a free downloadable game. Like, I can only be so bothered. At the end of the day, the rewards, even if you're on the ladder, are what? A couple of gold and like one more booster pack or something for each level. It's not that big a deal. It's like, what are we being mad about? That's why when people point out all the misplays or whatever, like I just don't care. Like I don't even understand what their goal is. But maybe why don't we make that a goal for 2024 for all of us on all social media? If we're gonna leave a comment, think about what the impact of that comment is. What are you trying to do with that comment? And does it matter to the audience? And does it matter to the creator? Because, like, and I don't care what the platform is. It could be TikTok, it could be YouTube, whatever. But if you're going to leave a comment like, is it funny? Are you entertaining people? Is it answering a question that the creator asked or seemed confused by or whatever? Okay, cool. Then leave the comment. If you're on a gameplay video and you're trying to point out a misplay in a game that the person won anyway, and it's just done, then like, what is that doing? You know what I mean? You're wasting your time and theirs, really, at the end of the day. All right. And Nick says, I've yet to be able to convince myself to play Control on Arena, even though I feel like it's one of those things I should try. Don't feel obligated to play anything. Honestly, play what you find fun. If you were trying to be a top level player, I would say sure. Play all the different deck types so you're familiar with them, you know how they work. You know, when you're going up against them, you kind of know the proper plays, that sort of thing. But if you're not, yeah, just build what you have fun with, what you know, what you're familiar with, and you're just going to have a better time. There's no should try anything. Like if you don't have a reason to try it unless you just want to, don't feel bad that you're not doing it. But all right, let's get into some videos here. We've killed like the first 10 minutes. Looks like people are coming and going. We're between like 30 and 40 people. That seems fine. Let me switch screens here. And let's get into the first card. These are not going to be in any particular order. I'm just whatever. I think they're just in the preview order they came up, reverse order from most recent to the oldest. So we'll just tackle them as we get to them. But this is Case of the Trampled Garden. This is a 3 mana. Well, I want to say saga. It's a case, but it doesn't quite work the same. When this case enters the battlefield, distribute 2+1/+1 counters on 1 or 2 target creatures you control. That's pretty sweet. To solve this, you have to have a total power of 8 or greater of your creatures, and then solved, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature, it gains trample. You know, this is like if you're into the +1/+1 counters deck, this card's actually all right. I could see myself playing 2, maybe even 3 of these in some of the builds I've played. Because 1, it's a guaranteed 2 counters no matter what, right? Whether you put it on 1 creature or 2 creatures. So that's already pretty good. To get to power 8 is not very difficult in those decks, especially on turn, well, with this, almost possible on turn 3, for sure possible on turn 4. Which then means when you attack, you're also putting an extra counter, which means you might have a bunch of stuff that triggers. Because like with 1 counter, you could possibly draw a card, have the Botanical Brawler get an extra counter, you know, whatever. And you're giving something else trample, which is pretty big. It's only trample to end of turn, but still trample nonetheless. So yeah, for an uncommon, this is actually okay. I think this could be solid. I don't hate this card. What else do we got here? Presumed Dead. This is like do we get this card in every set now? Like I only had to read the first line to know what this card is. But it's 2 mana for an instant. Until in the turn, target creature is +2/+2, and gains when this creature dies, return to the battlefield under its owner's control and suspected. Suspect creature has menace and can't block. Like I feel like we get a 1 or 2 mana version of this. Maybe not every set, but at least every other set. There's probably like 5 of these available in standard right now. And I don't even like I've seen them use a couple of times when you're using the prototype creatures, so when they die, they come back larger or whatever. But I'm usually not a fan of these types of cards. I mean, I guess depending on the deck, there are some spots where it can work. But this is one of those things where I question, and don't be wrong, R&D are much better experts at this than I am. But I do have the question of like, why do we need so many of these in standard at one time? Even if this was just a 2-year standard, we'd still have like 3 of them. You know what I mean? Like, did we really need this just to do the same thing and suspect? Like, meh. Like, limited play, obviously, the other versions are playable. This is playable. Nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of weird. I would rather just see some other new, fun, different card in that space, is all. What do we got here? This is a mythic. So, Undergrowth Recon. 3 mana, so 1 green. It's an enchantment, so that's cool. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Oh, this is interesting. This is, okay. All right. So a few things with this card. 1, if this found the right deck, some, let's call it like Bant control or something like that. With the number of non-basics some decks are playing, you could literally just constantly Field of Ruin or whatever the other one is, but the equivalent, right? Demolition Field, where you could just destroy all your opponent's non-basics. Like, if you just have nothing else to do. I mean, you still don't get to play one land a turn, right? Return no, it's just return a land. So it's not it doesn't even count as your one land drop. So yeah, every other turn you could just be killing them with it. Like this is interesting. It's probably better in older formats though, to be honest. Some format, where you're using something to cycle lands into your graveyard, or even something with I don't know, Dredge, Life from the Loam type decks. I don't know. Maybe they want something like this. Legacy lands might consider this type of card because they do have some sack effect lands, and this could work pretty well in there. So yeah, I don't know. This is a weird one. I think you have to build a deck that specifically wants lands in the graveyard or whatever. Obviously, this isn't something you're just going to toss in deck. I don't think right now, outside of maybe one particular build, possibly two, that this is going to have any real standard impact. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Let's see what else we got. But yeah, all right. So let's settle on that one. Let's go to let's check this one out. What is this? All right, Treacherous Greed. It's a 1 black white instant, and it's rare. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature that dealt damage this turn. Then you draw 3. Each opponent loses 3. Wow. This is kind of cool. I don't hate this. I mean, especially if you're playing, say, like a tokens type build, or maybe, I don't know, something with like an aggressive build, like clerics or something like that. This card could actually work. I mean, this is pretty significant. Like, you do lose a creature, sure, right? And it's an additional cost, so it's not when it resolves. So that is a catch here. You do have to give up that creature, but getting to draw 3 is big, and then you drain your opponent for 3. Whew, this is interesting. This is interesting. Like, this is almost like an extra burn spell for those aggro type decks. Now, that being said, this doesn't even have to be an aggro deck. Something like Orzhov Control with the Planeswalkers and stuff. I mean, one of your tokens gets in, you draw 3, which the control decks like doing anyway, and then you gain 3 extra life. Like, that's not bad either. This might be a legit card. This might show up in a couple of places. I like this. Oh yeah, I actually saw this one just briefly. Mostly, it's an uncommon. Fuss is put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. Bother lets you create 3 Thopters and Surveil 2. I'll tell you what I like about this card is that it can go into a pile of different aggro decks. Just a straight up +1 on everything at instant speed is a great combat trick. If your deck cares about +1/+1 counters, you are literally putting 1 on everything, which is huge. And then if you draw it late in the game after maybe your board's been swept or something, you're like, fine, I'll make 3 Thopters and then, get the best value off the top of my library. So this card is actually playable. I don't think you're going to play multiples of this. Or not a lot. You might play like 2 of or something, unless it's just a hyper aggro deck that really cares about +1/+1 counters. Sure. Because it has split mana. If your deck has white, red, white, blue, white, green, like you're going to be able to cast this. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a pretty cool one. Random's way cool that split card showed back up in the set too. What is this? Pick your poison. This is a common sorcery. Choose 1. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact. Each opponent sacrifices an enchantment, or each opponent sacrifices a creature with flying. Meh. I don't know how I feel about this. This is just they get to choose. I'm not feeling it. I mean, for 1 more mana, green already has a bunch of other stuff that gets rid of our. Like, you could play this, or you could play. I don't know. The one that you can also play black, and then you can exile a permanent, or you can get rid of an exile an artifact or enchantment. And on top of that, this is just sacrifice. It's also not exile. So if I was gonna do that, I'd just play any of the other stuff that guarantees I get to choose what to kill, and I'd just be better off with that personally. I don't think this is great. I'm not even sure. Man, I'm not even sure if I'd play this in limited unless I knew my opponent just had like one big enchantment or one big artifact that was like the bomb in their deck, and I wanted a way to remove it. All right, let's see what this is. Connecting the dots. This is looks like a rare. Yeah, for a second I thought it was mythic. 2 mana, enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. You can pay a red and 1, discard your hand, sacrifice, connect the dots, but all cards exiled this way enter their owner's hand. Hmm. Hmm. This one's peculiar because you have to take a turn off from either doing more damage or playing another body if you're obviously playing an aggressive deck, right? So that's like the first issue. And if it gets removed, you don't really get anything for the cards you put under it. But you can use this at instant speed, which is nice. It triggers for each creature, right? Whenever a creature you control attacks. Yeah, so every creature should put a card under this. So late game, even if you're attacking with just like 4 tokens, 5 tokens, you can load your hand back up, which isn't terrible. This feels like, man, this is tough. Like I kind of get why it's a rare, but I also feel bad. I'd feel bad as a new player opening this as a rare. You know what I mean? But I could see like a one of in a few builds. I mean, even a Gruul aggro deck, right? Like, all right, I'm gonna attack with these 3 dudes, put 3 cards under it. I'm gonna crack it, load my hand up, right? Like that's not terrible. It's not terrible. It's not like super, but it's not bad. I just don't see where you're playing more than at most 2 of these in a deck. But man, this is one I feel like I'm wrong about though. Like even while I'm sitting here looking, I feel like I'm missing something as to why this is in the rare slot. So yeah, who knows? Maybe it's much better than I'm giving it credit for. This one's in German, so I'm gonna have to read you the translation, but it's Relive the Past. 5 colorless white green for a sorcery. Return up to 1 artifact, 1 land card, 1 non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. They're 5/5 elemental creatures in addition to their other types. Wow, this is okay. First off, this is a pretty big cost. I mean, 7's a lot, but you get an artifact, a land, and an enchantment that's not an aura back from the graveyard. And they're all 5/5s. Mm. I mean, okay. This is part of the problem with a card like this is that you can't, in good conscience, unless you have like some combo where you're like dumping stuff in the graveyard and immediately getting the stuff out, really give this too high of a rating because we've made so much of the removal in standard to exiles. So stuff's not even going into the graveyard, whether it's ossifications or, you know, actually all the white enchantments. I don't think about it. They all exile, but also stuff like farewell, you know, that even removes the graveyard. Like, I don't know. The problem is I'm trying to think what, like, the effect on this is huge. I'm just trying to think what deck wants this. And the more I think about it, this just may not even be a standard card. This might be something that's better for commander. That you're built around 1 or 2 mechanics. Maybe you have a way to give your stuff haste, so when you get them out, you got 15 power worth of stuff that can attack, something like that. But yeah, it's neat, but I don't think I can do much with it. What else are we working with here? This is a random high cost dude. What is this? Bolrak Clan Basher. 6 mana for a 3/2. So that already doesn't feel great, but it does have double strike and trample. That's nice. And disguise, you can play it as a 2/2 and then flip it for 5 instead of 6. It's okay. I mean, double striking is always nice, and you can get a surprise double striker. That's cool. But yeah, probably not going to see much play. That's just a lot of an investment. Lazav, Wearer of Faces. Blue black for a 2/3 shapeshifter detective. Weird. Why is Lazav a detective? Well, there's probably some lore thing I don't know about. But whenever Lazav attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, then investigate. And then whenever you sacrifice a clue, you can have Lazav become a copy of target creature exiled with it until end of turn. Huh. So you can have Lazav become something for one turn, but you'd also be drawing a card from the investigate, the clue token. This is probably fine. I mean, I feel like it's a little tough that Lazav doesn't fit any creature types you want to build around. I mean, obviously, she's not like a fairy or anything, stuff like that. So you're just playing it as a quality 2/3 with upside to remove stuff from the opponent's graveyard. Which, reanimator decks, all that stuff is just getting more of a beating because cards like this exist. But yeah, it's not bad. It's just a fine card. If you're a fan of Lazav, you probably like this card. It's a good representation. Nothing wrong with that. We have several versions of Lazav in here, as it turns out. What else is interesting here to talk about? Why is this a 0/3? Let's find out. Reckless Instigator. It's a colorless and a red for a Devil Detective 0/3. Whenever Reckless Investigator attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. If you do, draw a card, and this card gets +2/+0. So you're effectively playing 2 mana for a 2/3 that lets you filter your hand every turn. Eh, eh, eh. Like, it's neat. If I have something that you know what? Actually, scratch that. This could work in like Descend type decks, right? Because you could just put something in the graveyard every turn. So this might actually, I was about to dismiss this, but this could be one of like the working pieces to help some of those Descend things work out. And you're not losing any value because you're just discarding a card to draw a card, which is totally fine. The problem is you have to attack and put it at risk. So there's that, but seems fine. All right. What else we got going on? This is Barbed Servitor. Wow, this is a weird looking card. It's like a Rakdos symbol on fire on top of this construct. Crazy. All right. Anyway, Barbed Servitor is a 4 mana, so 3 colors and a black for a 1/1 construct. It's indestructible, so that's cool. When it enters the battlefield, suspect it. It has menace and can't block. So it's an indestructible thing you can't block with. When it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. All right. When it deals damage, target opponent loses that much life. So technically, it's like a 2/1 menace creature that can't block. And then you lose a life, draw a card when it connects. I mean, I guess it kind of has to cost 4, at least 3, but I guess 4 is fair. I and it's only a 1/1, so it dies to a bunch of random things. Like I don't know how I feel about this. I don't like part of me is like, okay, cool. You get to drain your opponent, but I mean it's only gonna be for 1, unless you have something pumping up constructs or artifacts or whatever, I guess. You'd be dealing more damage. It's only 1 toughness, so whatever they block with menace, I mean, even 2/1/1s or whatever are gonna kill it. Yeah, I don't think this is good. This is one that again, this is one that like I get it. It kind of probably has to be rare with all the things that it's doing, but it doesn't feel great to open as a rare, right? Because you're just not going to put this into a lot of decks, I don't think. Interesting card though, really. I mean, sure, it's indestructible, fine, but there's still a bunch of stuff that gets rid of it right now. Because again, we just talked about a bunch of stuff exiles and doesn't actually kill things. So, eh. And with it being 1/1, I mean, fine, just block with 2/2s, and it doesn't really do anything. So it's just, I don't know, it's a weird card, and it can't block, which you really want from indestructible things, you know. Uh, Archdruid's Charm. This is 3 green. Choose one. Search your library for a creature or land. Reveal it. Put it in onto the battlefield. Tapped if it's a land. Otherwise, put it in your hand and shuffle. You can put 2+1 or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to so it fights something. And exile target artifact or enchantment. Uh I don't think you're saying you hope this becomes a full cycle. This probably doesn't become a full cycle because the cycle already exists. There's like was it Archmage's Charm and some other stuff from other stuff. I don't think this is a thing. All right. So this in general, let's see. Oh, we're talking about the other card there. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, this card is playable. I just like this is more if I'm playing mono green or something, this is a good all-around card, right? Late in the game, I could find a bigger body. If I just need to fight something, it's a removal card. It's at instant speed, and it lets me get rid of artifacts and enchantment. This could definitely see play. Whether you're talking about mono green, Gruul, whatever the case may be. You know, I could see that being a thing. But yeah, let's go back to the Servitor. Still don't think it's good. uh Whenever deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. I must be missing something on this. Because it still has to deal damage to an opponent to get the good side of the extra life. You don't get to draw a card if it's blocked. Yeah, I can't be talked into this. I'd love to be wrong on this card, but I'm just not feeling it for 4 mana. I can't in any way, shape, or form say this is gonna do a good thing. But yeah, this I'm not feeling. I'm sorry, y'all. Like I like all the words. I really do. But 4 mana on a 1/1, this quite ain't getting it for me. I think that's the real issue. If there's enough suspect synergies, maybe. Right? If there's stuff that like everything with suspect gets +1, or when something with suspect gets blocked, it gains, I don't know, something crazy like Death Touch or whatever. Then sure, then there's a chance. But as it is with no other information, just in a vacuum, yeah, I'm not feeling this. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading. I don't see where it's dealing 4 damage if it gets blocked by 2 things. Yeah, this when it gets deals combat damage to a player, it gets to do more damage. When it deals damage, if it's dealt damage, target opponent loses that much life. Like, yeah, sure. Opponent takes some damage, but eh. I mean, it's cool. It's gotta do something. It's gotta do something. Like, I will say this though. If you're able to do something wild like what is that one that like deals 13 from the old what was it? The old Innistrad deals like 13 damage to all creatures or something. You're doing something like that, then like maybe right? Something that you control, like you can just deal damage to this with a big bundle. But even then, like, why would I not just play spells that can just deal damage to my opponent, right? This is just more like campy because you can do a thing. But yeah, Blasphemous Act, that was the card I was thinking of. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm just I need more context before I can give that the thumbs up. All right. This is one that everybody's excited about. Anzrag. Or maybe it's Anzrag, because it's gotta sound epic. The Quake Mole, it's 2 red, green, 8/4. Whenever it becomes blocked, untap each attacking creature you control. After this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase. You can pay 3 red, red, green, green, and it must be blocked each combat this turn if able. I think that's the real interesting thing, right? That you can, I mean, I say that, but like, if your opponent doesn't block, they take 8 anyway. I mean, this card's definitely good. Is it the new 4 mana thing for the Gruul aggro decks? Probably. Kind of epic as well if you have some hasty options, because there are those. So like you play it, give it haste, get in there. I mean, obviously it can die to all the spot removal and whatever, because creatures die to removal. But Yeah, this is good. I don't think it's broken. I know people have been like, "Oh, this is the most busted Gruul card." Like, no, I think it's really good though. I think it is very good. But I will say 4 toughness really is kind of a hindrance on a card like this because there's a lot of quality 4 power things, especially at 4 and 5 mana that you are seeing a lot in different decks. So, good. I mean, it's also like what else is around after that combat when this gets blocked? Because to really take advantage of it, you want to attack with other things alongside it, but your opponent's going to block some number of those. So it's what even survives to get that next attack. This might just be fine being an 8-4 for 4 and just saying, cool, even if I don't get those extra attack steps, this is just a big 8 ball you got to deal with. Like, I'm okay with that. Mm-mm-mm-mm. What else do we have? There's this thing, which looks very weird. Kyle, oh, this okay, so it's in German. I was gonna try to read this, and I'm like, what's even going on there? So, oh, they gave it a fake name in here. So, it's Kylox is something, obviously, but it's a vehicle. Collect evidence 6. So, whenever you play it, or when you collect evidence, you can remove 6 cost worth of that thing from your graveyard. So, however many cards, and then it becomes an artifact until end of turn. So, you can turn it into an artifact without crewing it, which is pretty cool. And then when it attacks, you can cast an instant or sorcery spell from among those exiled cards. If a spell is cast this way and be put into your graveyard, you exile it or put it on the bottom instead. Okay, so that's kind of cool. You don't even lose a spell; it goes to the bottom of your library. So that's neat. Cruise for 2, so that's not bad. You can crew it fairly easily. It's a 4/4. Gives you some value. Yeah, there's got to be a way to play this. Whether you're playing it in some type of proliferate deck that wants you to play a lot of spells or something like that, like there has to be room here, right? Even if you just play this and then you get to play a thing for free. Proliferate triggers all your stuff. You're attacking with the 4/4. Like, yeah, there's bound to be something here. The only thing I would say that might hold this back, but even then, you can just attack with it as a 4/4. The issue I think could be that the spells you would generally play in those types of decks are very low cost. So you would need very likely, I'm guessing, at least 4 spells in your yard to even get to the 6 cost, and I think that could be part of the problem, right? So you're almost always just crewing this for 2, I think, at least in the early stages. Late game, obviously, then you're just exiling stuff and trying to attack with it. Let's see. And you can cast spells from any grouping of cards that have been exiled with this card. So it doesn't even have to be the ones that got exiled that turn. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, this probably has some value, but again, I think it only goes in 1 or 2 specific decks, but it could be really good in the decks it goes into. Um, is there any good? Is it proliferate already? I wouldn't say particularly great, but there are some that are passable. The sets looks good, but I would introduce this set to a new Magic player, and the mechanics are a little much. I think pretty much standard sets as a whole have been that way for a long time. They're not introductory level products. Okay, what do we got here? This is Rakish Scoundrel. 2 black green for a 3/3 with death touch. When it enters the battlefield or is turn faced up, target creature gains indestructible till end of turn. You can flip it for a disguise of 6. Well, it's a common, I guess. This one probably is not going to see much play, but it is at least an elf if you're looking for some more quality elves. So we have Slime Against Humanity. 2 colors and a green for a sorcery. Create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile or in your graveyard that are oozes or are named Slime Against Humanity. And that can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity. Huh. First off, I think this is the first time we have a card that lets you play an infinite amount that's a common. I feel like the others have all been uncommon to this point. So that's kind of interesting. Actually, yeah, I think the others were all uncommons. I'll have to think about it. Um, question is, how many of these would you even play, and is the impact even that big, right? Because you'd have to be playing stuff that puts stuff in your graveyard, first off. Because yeah, because either it has to be an exile in your graveyard. So you would need some number of these plus some number, or I mean, I guess you could play the first one just so one dies and goes to your graveyard because there wouldn't be any other bonuses. Well, it'd be at least two. So the first one's at least a 2/2. So you're paying a 3 mana 2 to a gray ogre basically with no other abilities. Um, I mean, the problem here is these don't skip, they don't grow, right? Like your first one, hopefully, I'm assuming, well, it's going to be at least a 2/2, right? Even if there's nothing else in the graveyard. Then your next one is a 2+, so it's a 3/3. And then your next one's a 4/4. Like, you're not really getting ahead until you play your third one and getting a 3 mana 4/4. You know? Like, I don't. Okay, the others have been common. For some reason, I thought they were uncommon. I was thinking about, like, I thought Rat Colony was common for some reason, or uncommon. But either way, that aside, I don't know how good this is. I'm really like, the words make me wanna play this, and I wanna build a deck around it, which is interesting, but it feels like there's a lot to do here. There's ways to reduce the cost some, yeah, sure, but the problem is, okay, now you're playing those, but you're playing less Slime Against Humanity, right? Or you're taking turns off to try to fill the graveyard so you can play a Slime Against Humanity. But if you've not played any slimes, then let's say turn one, you mill a couple things, and one Slime Against Humanity goes in. And then, like, turn two, maybe you play something else that mills, and you get two more Slime Against Humanities in the graveyard. So you have three, right? So then on turn three, you get to play a 3 mana 5/5. Awesome. But then they just kill it. So now you're still behind, having expended a minimum of 3 cards and 3 mana or 3 lands, right? When you might be getting beat down on the whole time, right? The opponent plays a turn one thing, they play a turn two thing. They either, if they're on the play, they played a turn three thing when you played. If they're on the draw, they remove your turn three thing, and then they keep attacking, right? That's my issue here, right? I don't know. And then don't be wrong, I think there is going to be a build with this, and I'm going to try it and do it for sure. But I think it's easy to look and go, oh, I can have any number of these and it's going to be awesome. And then ultimately be like, it's not that awesome though. They're cool. I mean, I think they're cool. And if it does work, and let's say you hit perfect and you get a couple in there, and then the next turn you get two or three in there, and whatever, and then you're playing a 3 mana like 6/6 or 7/7 that doesn't get dealt with, then they start to become really scary. But I think also you need something that probably lets you also draw cards so you have access to multiples of these. Yeah, I don't know. This has to do something. I just think where I've had a lot of people mention it, or even people in the Discord talking about it, like, feels like the hype has been around a 9, maybe even an 8. And I'm really more at like a 6.5 on it. You know, I think it's still playable. I think it's cool. It'll be one of those cards that's always going to have value because anytime you can have an infinite number of something, people always want at least 12 to 16 of them in their deck. So they're going to carry some value. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely going to try it though. Yeah, I'm going to build a deck with this regardless. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Blood Spatter Analysis. That's a cool name for a card, actually. Red Black Enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature an opponent controls. So not a target, just target creature. And then whenever one or more creatures dies, you mill a card and put a bloodstain counter on Blood Spatter Analysis. Then sacrifice it if it has 5 or more counters on it. When you do, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. If this, I really was expecting that last sentence to end with from the graveyard to your battlefield. The fact that it's to your hand makes this a lot less exciting. But it is a removal spell. It does deal 3 damage for 2 mana. That can't be overstated, really. And you have to mill a card, but that's fine if you're playing some type of reanimator strategy anyway. But it does just return the card to your hand. I think I'm trying to figure out, like, if I'm playing a deck, I mean, even then, though, worst case scenario, I mean, you kill something for 3 and you still get a card back, right? So it's you play it basically, you're playing a 3 damage sorcery with hopefully 3 turns later or whatever, you get to return a creature from a graveyard to your hand. That's fine. I don't think it's stellar, but it's fine. I think if I have some deck that can also use stuff out of the graveyard, and to be honest, that might be the case with these not investigate, but whatever the other things, collect evidence, right? That might actually be a thing. If that's the case, then this card's really good. If that's not the case, then the card's just okay, but still playable, I think. What is this? Really random looking thing, but it's the Pride of Hulklade. 10 and a green. Obviously, it's going to have a reduction effect, right? All right. It's a crocodile elk turtle. That's a 215. It costs X less to cast, where X is the total toughness of creatures you control. So it cares about toughness, not power. Interesting. So from 11, realistically, you're probably playing this for like, well, it's total toughness. So, I mean, maybe you could end up playing this for just like 3 mana or something. It has Defender, or you can additionally pay 2 blue, and until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0, gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its toughness, and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. I mean, I guess this just goes into those Defender decks. I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, there's a few of those that already exist. You know, the high toughness variation decks. You go ahead and play this in those. I think, man, that's pretty sweet though. If this connects and you get to draw 15, that's kind of stupid. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a neat card, but I think this is more of a commander card than a standard card. It's cool though. I like it. It's a weird creature type, crocodile, elk, turtle. I'm not sure how that happens. It's weird, but it's cool. It's cool. I'm into it. What else do we have here? We have another elf, Aftermath Analyst. Elf Detective 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. So if you have anything that cares about graveyard stuff, this is perfect. Colorless or 3 colorless and a green. Sacrifice this. Return all land cards from a graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Ooh. Not sure how good that is, but there's probably a deck somewhere that wants that. I mean, I don't think current standard wants a card like this, but who knows? Over the course of the year, maybe we get some other stuff that cares about that. Let's see. Get a leg up. It's an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control and gains reach. Wow. Wow. I was about to just dismiss this card, but +1 for each creature you control. I wonder, as at instant speed, is this something like Selesnya tokens might want? We almost always have like 4 or 5 things out, and then you make everything scary to block or not block. I'm kind of, yeah, I don't, maybe not, but man, this card's close. This card's close. I think in the right type of build, maybe, but those builds just may also not have room because they spend so much time making tokens or working their token synergies really overall. All right, what else we got here? Let's see. We have Repeat Offender, 2 mana, 2/1, Human Assassin. You can pay 3. If Repeat Offender is suspected, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Otherwise, suspect it. Oh, interesting. So you can pay 3 and it becomes a suspect. And then because it's a repeat offender, you can just keep putting +1/+1 counters on it. That's kind of amusing. Mechanically, this is kind of a cool card, the way it's named. I actually like this. Is it any good? I don't know. Like paying 3 to get a +1/+1 is a whole lot, so probably not. But I kinda like it though. It's a cool thing. I even like the artwork here where like the dude's looking at the wanted poster backwards, obviously, but you can see the wanted poster and then you see the person on the poster. So like that's pretty cool. That card like conceptually has a lot of neat stuff going on. Polygraph Orb. Well, the fact that this costs 5, it better do something great. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, and you lose 2 life. You can pay 2 and tap it, collect evidence of 3, which is pretty easy, and then each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card or sacrifice a creature. Wow, that's a lot to digest. All right, so you're paying 5, looking at the top 4, you're putting 2 in your hand, the others go to your graveyard, but then you lose 2 life. So you're paying 5 for the best 2 of your top 4 cards. And then you can pay 2, and the opponent effectively either loses 3 or discards a card to sacrifice a creature. Yeah, for constructed play, I'm not really feeling this. But, in limited, I probably would. I mean, getting your top 4 in limited is a pretty big chunk, honestly. What else do we got going on? Let's see if we can find something interesting here. Clandestine Meddler. This is a vampire rogue. It's a 3/4/3/2. When it enters the battlefield, suspect up to 1 other target creature you control. Whenever 1 or more suspected creatures you control attack, surveil 1. Okay, so if you do have stuff that cares about the graveyard, or you're playing a suspect mechanic based deck, this is actually pretty neat. It's a 3 mana 3/2, so not the best, but giving something else menace is actually pretty big depending on the game state. So I'm kind of into it. I think it needs a very specific type of deck, but I could see where it could work. Not top tier or anything, but it's neat. Prof's Eidetic Memory. Colorless and a blue. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. You have no maximum hand size. People love that on Magic cards. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than 1 card this turn, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. Interesting. So the first turn you play it, you've already drawn your second card. So you'll get to put at least 1 counter on something the first turn. So you're paying 2 mana minimum to draw a card, put a counter on something, have no max hand size. After that, it's just how many cards are you drawing. This feels like I could do a lot of something with this in Commander. Not sure I'm doing a lot with this in Standard. However, if I'm playing one of the like draw your second card decks, this could end up being pretty big. Because this one helps draw that second card for the turn you play it. But then also you have other mechanics already letting you draw extra cards. So you're going to be putting, I'm assuming, at least 1, if not 2 counters on creatures every turn, or a creature every turn you attack. It's all right. This might have a little bit of a home. This is a neat card because it feels like it kind of fills a gap in a existing archetype that's not good right now, or at least not competitive right now. So maybe this does have a spot. Had to think about that one a bit, but I could be talked into that being a real thing. Let's see what else we've got going on. Here's a random equipment. It's a Crovad Haunch, which I guess is an animal that you just took a big leg off of. It's only 1 mana, which is cool. It's a food equipment. Creature gets +2/+0. You can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it. You gain 3 because it's food. If it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you can pay a white and a colorless. And if you do, create 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. So the dogs get to come eat the bones, I guess. This is interesting because I don't know how often this would go to the graveyard. I think if there was more guarantee this was going to the graveyard, then just having a thing where you get 2 creatures on top of it is kind of cool. But more often than not, this is likely like the creature it's on probably dies and this just sits there. So if I'm looking to play equipment, because there are still some things in Standard that care about equipment, This at least can get consideration because it's only one to play, two to equip, which is at least serviceable. But I wouldn't expect big things out of the card. It's neat though. I'll give it that. What else do we got going on? All right, here's a thing. The name for this is Greenbelt Orator. 3 colorless and a green. It's a Centaur citizen. That's cool. Hadn't seen citizens in a minute. It's a 4/4, so 4/4 for 4. When it's turn face up, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. They gain trample to end of turn. However, the disguise cost on this to flip it is 7. Yeah, not that interested. I saw 4/4 for 4 and thought, okay, maybe this does something that's somewhat playable, but yeah, having to flip this to put the counter on everything for 7, that's a big investment. Probably not looking because at 7 you can just play the big Tyrannix Rex and just attack for 8. You know what I mean? Like I'm not looking to do that, I don't think. Do anything else good here? What does this guy do? Mistway Spy. It's a merfolk, so that's cool. It has flying, so merfolk need another quality 1/1. Here you go, 1/1 flyer. It has disguise of 2 to flip it, so that's cool. When it's turn face up, until end of turn, whenever a creature you control does combat damage to a player, investigate. This is solid. I don't think it's crazy, but a 1/1 for 1 flyer is okay. You know, disguise cost is cheap enough that you could justify it. And getting to an investigate, if you have stuff that cares about artifacts, maybe it's a thing. So like, yeah, I don't hate this. This is all right. I don't know if I'm like immediately putting it in Merfolk. I don't know if like it pushes Merfolk to the top, but it's at least a reasonable quality card. All right, another uncommon case. So this is Case of the Burning Mask. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature. So you're paying 3 to deal 3. If you have 3 or more sources you control, deal damage this turn. You solve it. And then once it's solved, you can sacrifice this, exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can play one of them this turn. Yeah, I'm not feeling it. This is a lot of work to get to play one card effect. Like this is 3 mana to deal 3 damage and then get the option to play something else. It doesn't say without paying the cost or anything. So you still have to cast it from the sounds of things. Yeah, I'm not feeling this one. Not feeling it. Especially since for 3 you can just deal 5 a bunch of different ways in red right now. You don't always have 3 sources dealing damage for the turn either. So it'd be hard to even solve it to begin with. It's like, yeah, not feeling that one too much. What's this guy? It's a 3 mana 4/2. It has hexproof as long as it's your turn. Can't be blocked by nameless creatures. Oh, that's fair. So any of the 2/2s that are face down can't block it. This is fun for a limited, but I don't think it has any real value in standard, unfortunately. Repulsive Mutation, green, blue, X, instant. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Then counter up to 1 target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Oh, this is interesting. So it's kind of a counter spell, right? So let's say you have some 4/4s or something on the battlefield. Your opponent goes to play, let's say, Sunfall with a couple of mana open. You respond by putting 3 counters on your creature, so now they have to pay 7. Though, actually, not even that, because even if you don't have the mana, you just then counter up. Yeah, so you could just pay 0, and they still would have to pay 4. Just whatever creature, just the highest power among creatures you control. This card feels playable. Like it's an instant speed combat trick, whether you're attacking to punch for lethal or you're blocking to get rid of something bigger. You can sit on it if you need it to be a counter. Like this is kind of a thing. like this, like it's quirky, and I kind of don't want to give it props, but here we are. Hi from Twitch. Hey, this is cool. I kind of like this card. It reminds me a little bit of the what was it? The blue green charm from oh, the set with the school. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name. But I did play that a couple of times because you had an option to counter or an option to fight. And I played that in a couple decks and it was fine. This doesn't obviously it's not a fight spell, but you can also just grow a big creature to kill, once you get something through or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of into this. I could work with this. Yeah, Strixhaven, that's the set I was thinking of for sure. Yeah. All right, cool. This one I'm gonna have to think about. I'm gonna find a couple of decks for that, I'm sure. All right, just because the stats look weird in passing. So this is Essence of Antiquity. It's a 5 mana 1/10 golem. It has disguise of only 3, which is pretty cool. And when it's turn face up, creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn, and you untap them. Probably not. Probably not. This is cool, but again, limited play. Sure, you go for it. Giving stuff indestructible in big combat situations, solid. I don't see where I'm going to want this in constructed. Like, not for that investment, just to give stuff hexproof. Unless we're living in a world where there's just a lot of depopulates or something, then I guess maybe I would consider it. All right. We have Fugitive Codebreaker. 2 mana, 2/1, prowess and haste. So I like these words. Disguise of 6, not cool. And when it's turn face up, discard your hand, draw 3 cards. If you're just playing a prowess deck, this is fine. If you just need another body, right? It's a quality 2/1 for 2. It has haste, so that's always good. Rarely could I see a situation where you're going to want to use the disguise unless you want that as a late game option because it is a way to draw cards, maybe after you lost your couple of early creatures or something. Cool card, but man, that disguise cost is a lot. 6 is a bunch. Unless you have something reducing that, that's tough. Like, would this be busted if the thing costs 4? Probably not. Like, 6 almost feels like the number they put on it just to know it's safe. You know what I mean? Like at 4, there's probably like, I don't know, this might be too good. 5, there might still be a lot of value there, but put it at 6, then like you can only use it late game or whatever. And you know, but otherwise, meh. Hmm. I mean, it does reduce your instants and sorceries. I mean, that's a real thing, but it's reduced for each instant sorcery art in your graveyard. The thing is, though, the decks that are playing prowess, their instant and sorceries don't cost anything. The cost is reduced for the number of instant sorcery. That's true. The cost does get reduced, but I think you just play this card anyway. Honestly, I think overall you just play this card anyway. Like they don't. I mean, having another haste thing with prowess is super annoying for your opponents, right? Because they're already having to deal with Monastery Swift Spirit, and they have this. And I felt like those decks, unless you were playing, I think the 1/2 dwarf that gets bigger, you didn't have many additional 2 mana things. So now the deck gets to decide what 2 mana things do I want. And this could be pretty strong. But yeah, having that cost get reduced helps. 6 is a lot though. So you kind of have to work your way to it. And then the question becomes, do you want this to stay just a 2/2 attacker or whatever while you're working toward that other cost? But I will say this, the other part of the argument here is maybe it's just effectively a 4 mana 2/1 with haste that draws you 3 cards, right? If you get it late in the game. Because you pay 3 to put it face down, you pay 1 to turn it up, and then you get your 3 cards because your hand's already empty. That's pretty sweet, right? You get a 2/1 haste prowess and 3 cards for 4 mana. There's a lot of discussion to be had there. That's a real thing for the mana cost. Yeah, this one again, I don't think it goes into a pile of decks. It goes into a very specific type of deck. But if you're playing prowess, the spell heavy deck already, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. It's a better 2 mana option than some of the other things that have existed. Yes, I did see this one come across social media. Doppelgang. XXX, blue green, sorcery. For each of up to X target permanents, create an X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So you choose, let's say you want to copy two things, you would have to pay 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. And then you would make two tokens of each of those things, right? For each thing you target, you create a token that's a copy. That's so many. So for each of X target permanents, so you chose two, create two tokens that are copies of that permanent. So you would make 6 tokens effectively because you'd be making no, you'd be making more than that, right? Because you choose no, yeah, two different things you chose. You're making two of each, so you're making four. Like that's a lot. That's a lot to read. Yeah. So you're making four. Yeah, I don't. If again, this feels like if you just have a ton of mana, great. You can do some fun things with this. But uh otherwise, yeah. I mean, you can play one of in some builds. You get it late in the game. You do something really fun in standard if you just have one of. But generally, this is probably a commander type card. Get to 10 or 12 mana, copy like three things, and then go nuts. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's a good assumption when we're talking about like Crackle with Power. That's the red card. It's kind of the same thing, right? Once you have the mana, Crackle with Power can just end the game. This doesn't quite end the game, but you can make a board state or get enough big effects, especially if there's like ETBs or something, to really start pulling away. It's a neat card, though. I just don't know exactly what I would do with it off the top of my head. What else? Other interesting things do we have here? This is Nervous Gardener, colorless and a green for a 2/2. Also has disguise, but just of one. When it's turned face up, search your library for a land, reveal it, put it into your hand. Ugh, I didn't even put it on the battlefield. Never mind, I'm out on this one. Like, I mean, I'm paying 3 to put it face down, and I'm paying 1 to turn it up. Still only have a 2/2 creature. I get to search for a land, but then it just goes into my hand. Like, we can just pay other things and ramp up faster and just put it right into play. So, not really feeling that one. Here's some interesting things. What do we got here? Persuasive Interrogators. 4 black, black for a 5/6. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. This is probably fine. I mean, somebody will probably die to this, right? I mean, it's very likely that this would, if you already had a bunch, but even then, it costs 6 to play this, so you'd still need like another turn to crack all those uh, clue tokens. So, like, yeah, probably not too much here, honestly. How would doppelgangers work with gruff triplets? If you target the main thing that makes the tokens when they come into play, then you would get 2 copies of that. Like in our example, that would make 3 each. So cool. All right. Like nothing wrong with that. Um, but otherwise, yeah, it just works like what you would expect. It's not really too tricky. Interesting arts on the alt art cards. Yeah, they're made to look um like folder dossier type things that an investigator would use. Gruff T ETB only triggers when it's not a token. Yes, which is why you would target the actual creature that made the tokens. The other tokens would just become regular tokens. But you could just have a pile of them, so as soon as any one of them died, then they would all get +3 or +6 or whatever. All right, let's go here. Delney, Streetwise look. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So I had a conversation with somebody about this earlier. Actually, creatures. It's a human scout 2/2 for 3. Creatures you control power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. The concern here people had with this one was, is this going to become the thing that people play in the Bant toxic decks? In theory, yes, they could. However, my thing here is that those decks don't often want 3 mana things. If you go look at how they're built, the only 3 mana things you'll tend to see are the 1/4 that exiles a creature, or yeah, a creature power 3 or less. Other than that, they want a bunch of things that are ones and twos because they want to be able to play the spells that protect their um the green toxic thing, the rot priest, right? So them playing this means they're taking away a slot for something else, or the deck just morphs. Possible that the deck changes to accommodate this card. Wouldn't be unrealistic. However, just running your things into another 2 power creature just means you trade unless you're already playing other things that pump stuff. Um, with Esper mid range, in theory, yes, it works with that deck. However, I would say that I don't know if it's as hugely effective in that deck because I'm trying to think, like, it helps with Bat, so Bat could get 2 things, but technically you're playing Bat well before you play Delny. It worked with Rafine one time because once Rafine gets counters, it's no longer 2 power or less, so that becomes an issue. Um, Maybe it's still a legend, and there are legend builds that still work with it. I think it will have a home in places. I just don't know if the immediate concern everybody had was the thing that everyone should be worried about. However, this card is already going for a whole lot because I think it's going to fit a whole variety of decks, especially in Commander, that are going to push this up quite a lot. So I don't know. I don't even know if maybe this is a Commander itself that people want to play, to be honest. You could probably build around it. So yeah, I don't know. It will get played in Standard. I'm just not totally sure where yet, or how many decks want to invest into a 3 mana 2/2 that you're hoping for upside that may or may not get realized. But yeah, and honestly, I might get dusted by this card. That's totally okay. Like, that's a real thing. All right. We have Vein Ripper. 3 black, black, black. So 6 mana for a 6/5 flyer. It has Ward of Sacrifice a creature. That's pretty big. Whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. Ooh. Ooh. I mean, 6 is a lot. Don't get me wrong. But a 6/5 flyer that if your opponent targets it specifically, they have to sacrifice a creature. This is kind of a fun card against control decks, right? Because they almost have to use a sweeper on this because a lot of times they're not even going to have tokens. Like, that's huge. And what's even better is it's not even just your creature dies, it's whenever a creature dies. Ooh, this could just be a finisher on its own. Like, if you have any way to just sacrifice your tokens or whatever, or you just play it alongside some tokens, you're just running into combat. Because your opponent's either taking the damage or they're going to take more whenever the tokens die, right? Yeah, this is. Mm, mm, I don't know. 6 is a lot. 6 is a lot for sure, but the upside of this is very big. And if you found a way to ramp this into play or trick it into play somehow, wow, this could really go serious. This is cool. Yeah, obviously a superstar unlimited if you get it. There's no doubt you're going to play that. Drag the Canal. Black and a blue it's an instant, create a 2/2 white and but weird. It's a black and a blue, but it creates a white blue detective creature token. If a creature dies this turn, you gain 2 life, surveil 2, then investigate. That's a lot of value for 2 mana. So instant speed, make a 2/2. If a creature dies, then you also get to gain 2 and surveil 2 and make a clue token. That's a lot. Like, this card has to see play, right? I mean, if nothing else, you just make a 2/2 to block one of their other small creatures or just trade. And then, so you got to kill a creature, you gain 2 life, you surveil 2, and you will possibly draw a card later in the game. This card's solid. This is good. To be honest, this is a good card. Right? Like, I don't even understand why there's so much stuff on this card. Like, this is silly. Yeah, this is wild. I don't know. Like, yeah, that card seems not right. That's all I know. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh, yeah. Forensics researcher. Two colors and a blue, 1/3, untap another target permanent you control. Tap, collect evidence. 3, tap, target creature you don't control. Untap another target permanent. Collect evidence. Actually, you know what? This goes infinite if you have two of these and the new Merfolk card that whenever a creature becomes tapped, you make a Merfolk. Like, that's just in and of itself. You just keep tapping, untapping each other, and then you just make a bunch of 1/1s, right? Or am I misread? Yeah, because you tap one researcher to untap the other researcher. That creates a token. Then that researcher untaps the first one, and that makes a token. And then your opponent has to sweep the board, or they die. Like, that's kind of silly. And randomly, you can also tap a creature you don't control. I mean, it is 3 mana for a 1/3, so I don't even know if you'd want to put that into the deck and try to make it a thing. But, just something worth noting that it could be a thing. Um, think drag is one of those that's good, but not good enough. I don't know, man. I think drag is definitely playable. Like, drag is literally a 2/2 body. Like, anytime you kill something, you can just basically say it's +2 mana to gain 2 life, surveil to investigate. Like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. What else do we got? This is probably bad, but I'm gonna click on it. Hedge Whisperer, 1 green, 0/3, Elf Druid Detective. You may choose not to untap this during your untap step. You can pay 4 and tap it to collect evidence 4. Target land you control becomes a 5/5 plant boar creature with haste as long as this remains tapped. It's still a land. Activate only as a sorcery. This thing has so many restrictions. Like, it's an 0/3 to start with. Then you have to pay 4 and tap the card. So now you're losing your blocker on top of having to pay 4 mana. You remove some number of things from your graveyard. Then the land becomes a 5/5, and that's cool. But then it's only as a sorcery, even with all those restrictions on it. Yeah, yeah, I don't even know why. like like it's weird when we get cards like this. Especially uncommon. It should have like a little more value, right? Maybe it's just man, I don't know. I don't know. This feels like it's asking you to do a lot to get a 5/5. Like, at some point you've invested 5 mana and some number of cards from your graveyard just to get a 5/5 plant boar, right? Yeah. Not not into it. Let's see what else we have. What is this? Concealed weapon. Another equipment, 2 mana. It equips for 2. Get +3/+0. When it's turned face up, attach it. Oh, so it's an equipment that's a creature and has disguise 3, but then you attach it. Oh, that's interesting. If there's a deck where you want to play equipment, this is interesting because, like, obviously, if your board gets swept or your creatures die or whatever, you don't have anything to equip to, you at least have another body. So I don't think, I mean, again, unless that's a very specific deck, I don't think it'll get played much, but it's kind of cool. We at least made a card that fills a gap. I'm always for that. We have new Vanifar. What does this do? Vanifar Evolved Enigma, 2 colorless green blue, 3/4, Elf Ooze Wizard. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one. Cloak a card from your hand to put it on the battlefield face down as a 2/2. Put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. Hmm. Well, this is kind of like the lead card for having cloaked face down things, right? But you put a +1/+1 on each actually it's not even each, it's each colorless thing. So you can use this with artifact creatures too. This hmm, this might be okay. Right? Like this might actually be a thing. I mean, 4 mana for 3/4 is not the best value, but you immediately get to do something. Either turn a card in your hand into another 2/2, or you get to put a counter on all the stuff you already have, right? That's kind of a cool thing. You could also build some type of aggro artifact deck where maybe you're already playing enough artifact creatures, and it could either be, blue white or something, and you're just splashing green for Vanifar, or it could be blue green. And then immediately you're playing this thing, putting a +1/+1 on all your stuff and getting more value. Like there's got to be something here. This is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. Man, all these cards would be so much more powerful and fun. You know what though? My counter argument to this is more of these cards have a chance of being played because you're in a larger standard, right? Because there's more possible cards to work with those cards to do the thing they're trying to do. Whereas if you only had a 2-year standard, then a lot of cards don't even have synergistic cards to work with. So a larger standard is actually better for more cards more than it is worse, really. At least the way I see it. Because you're always going to have the same things, right? There's always going to be some number of sweepers, there's always going to be some number of counters, there's going to be some number of removal spells, right? Those are always going to exist. Like we almost always have some quality 2 mana black removal spell. Always going to be a thing, right? But as you expand the standard, okay, well, those things still exist, but now there's more cards to at least work with some of these other cards, or at least make it worth fighting those. All right. What does this? This looks epic. Unyielding Gatekeeper. 2 mana, 3/2, Elephant Cleric. Only a disguise of 2, which is awesome. When it's turned face up, exile another target non-land permanent. If you controlled it, return it to the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, its controller creates a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. Oh, so this is cool. So it's a 3 mana, 3/2 straight up if you just want to fight with it. And it does happen to be a cleric, which is cool. But if you turn it face up, you either get to flicker one of your own cards and get another effect, or you just remove a creature and they get a 2/2. And it's not even like remove it until this card dies. It's just gone, right? Yeah, just exile another target non-land permanent, and then its controller creates a 2/2. So that's actually, this card's good. Like this card is actually good. I mean, just 3/2 for 2 with upside. That's actually pretty significant. And it's not even exile a creature, it's exile a non-land permanent. So you could get a planeswalker, enchantment, whatever's annoying you. They do get a 2/2, but fine, whatever. You're likely either getting rid of a super powerful thing or getting one of your big things back. I like this card. This card's neat. I think this is the type of card that can easily be misread. Like, sure, that's totally okay that it requires that because it's a quality card on its own. See, the problem is most of the cards either cost a lot or they're very small creatures. This is just a fine 3/2 for 2. But if we get it late in the game, well, now you're paying 5 to just get rid of something and still have a 3/2, right? I'm okay with that. Or flicker one of your own cards and just get an upside ability. Like I'm totally fine with this. Yeah, this card quality for sure. Also randomly going for like $10 already on some places. What is this? Private Eye. Oh, it's a homunculus. That's funny. It's a private eye with a singular eye. Colorless white blue for a 3/3. Other detectives get +1/+1. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, target detective can't be blocked this turn. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. It's another when you draw your second card thing. However, most of the draw your second card things, I believe, are green, blue, or black currently. I'm trying to think if there's any that aren't, but I think those are the colors where those all fall right now. So you'd have to find a way to play white, but this also wants you to play detectives. So it'd be interesting to see how many detectives care about you drawing an extra card or draw extra cards. This is actually pretty neat. I dig this. Like this is pretty cool. Uh, I like the disguise mechanic just right. Here's the thing though. Mono red won't be able to kill your 2/2 very easily because it has the ward 2 on top of it. That's one of the big things. The other thing is too, it's about playing the most efficient ones, right? So if you're playing the things that only cost 1, 2, or 3 to flip, then those make a big difference because you're getting that immediate ability that could matter. Like we're talking about the last one. If you were on the play and you played a 3/2 face or 2/2 face down, they're probably not removing it. Or if they are, that's their whole turn because it would likely cost them 3 or 4 mana to get rid of it. And then the next turn, even if they go to play something like, say, a rage on something or whatever, then you turn it face up, you get rid of their thing, you're not taking any damage, and then they're just replacing it with a 2/2, right? So there's still some benefit there. And that's also if you haven't played another 1 or 2 mana thing because you had extra mana, right? Something else you could block with or whatever. Also, could save your own creature if they tried to target the other thing. And if it has an ETB ability, you get that flickered ability again, too. So that's the biggest thing. If you're going to be trying to use any of those against mono red, the thing is they need to be good on their own and then have affordable disguise abilities if you want to be able to take advantage of them. That's why I'm saying the elephant is actually pretty cool because it's a 3/2 for 2 straight up, right? Against any deck. If I just want to fight with it, I can fight with it. But it's also cheap enough that if I need to play it early and then use its ability to buy some time or whatever, you can do that too. I think that's the real issue when looking on what disguise cards you're going to play. But back to the private eye, I think this is pretty cool. There's a lot of detectives. Don't know how many of them. I haven't been paying too much attention to just detective at large. I'd have to do a card search and see what's out there. And how many of them care about drawing an extra card or draw cards. I think is going to be the biggest difference there. Scrolling down through, let's see what else we can find. This thing, it's Intrude on the Mind. This sounds like a card that should have Jason in the artwork. 3 blue, blue for an instant. You reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses one of those piles. That pile goes in your hand. The other's in your graveyard. Create a 0/0 color stopper artifact creature token when flying. Then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each card put into your graveyard this way. So the downside for the opponent is you get a Thopter that's going to be equal in size to the number of cards they put it into your graveyard versus put into your hand. Fun combat trick. I'll say that, right? Because that forces your opponent's decision a little bit. You look at the top 5, and then they're going to give you probably a Thopter between the size of 1 and 4, right? Depending on if they put stuff in the graveyard or in your hand. So that's kind of a big deal. 5 is a lot of cards to get to look at. I think the question will be how many decks want to play this versus playing the other one that lets you look at the top 4 and then has flashback or whatever. Like that is in so many decks already. I don't know if you have room to play that and this. Maybe you split them now and you go 2 and 2. Maybe this gets played more post rotation in October. It's a cool card though. It's a pretty cool card. I don't hate this. I think it can definitely find its way into some decks for sure. But yeah, 5. It's one of those things like you look at it and say 5 is a lot, but you are getting. I'm going to assume most of the time like 2 cards and a 3/3. That's pretty good for 5 mana at instant speed. It's hard to argue against that. So there's definitely some value here. I'm just not sure what the final result looks like. But I can easily give that one a thumbs up because it's going to show up in decks for sure. What else do we have here that's interesting to talk about? What's this? Okay. Oh yeah. I saw this one in the previews they did on video. Assemble the players. A colorless and a white. It's an enchantment. You look at the top card of your library at any time. Once each turn, you can cast a spell with power or cast a creature spell with power 2 or less on the top of your library to the battlefield. I added it to the battlefield. I mean, where else are you going to play it? This one's weird because it does let you see the top of your library, right? So you always get that extra value, which is smart. You get to cast possibly an extra creature each turn if there's one on top of your library. If you have multiples of these, each one could trigger, so you could play something extra. So that's cool. I think the problem though is when you're playing that many low power things, it's usually to be aggressive. And if you're playing a symbol the players, you're choosing to not be as aggressive, right? Because some number of those early turns is going to be playing this instead of playing a creature. But I will also say that maybe you do play like one or two copies of these, and then later in the game, you just get to play extra things off the top of your library, right? To try to rebuild your board or something. That could be serviceable. Now, is it good? We're gonna experiment with it and try it out when the set hits. But definitely something to think about. It's interesting. Because any and also just having that information on what's on top of your library that your opponent doesn't have is also very good because it's not revealed. You just get to look. So yeah, I don't know. This one's one that I feel like is playable, but probably not more than one or two in the decks that are gonna want it. And even then, those decks would probably need, not a ton of ways, maybe not have a lot of ways to fill their hand otherwise. Works great. I don't know if it is great though. Like, first off, do those decks want to have more than a couple of mana at a time? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they want to have more than, like, let's call it 3 mana or so, right? They want to be playing creatures in those early turns. And again, I think it's fine later. Like, if your plan doesn't go right, having one or two copies to just like rebuild up, I think is really good for that. But I'm not, yeah, I don't know. This is one I'll probably just have to see in action more than anything else. I think it's usable in a lot of decks. I just don't know if it's necessarily better than a lot of things that already exist. What do we have here? What is this? Buried in the Garden. 2 colorless green whites. Enchants a land. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent you don't control until this card leaves play. So another version of that. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional mana of any color. Okay, I guess. I mean, it does get rid of any non-land permanent, so that's a thing. But I mean, it's 4 mana. I mean, this is one I'm just looking at. Like, I feel like it's going to show up in decks somewhere along the way. But is it something you got to go out of the way to like pick up to play in standard? Do you need to craft it? Probably not. It's an uncommon. It's solid, but I don't know which decks want to play it right now. Pyrotechnic Performer. This looks interesting. It's a 3/2 Viashino Assassin. It has Disguise of 1. Whenever Pyrotechnic Performer or another creature you control is turned face up, that creature deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Okay, so here's one of the payoffs for playing all those face down creatures. So that's kind of cool. Hmm. You get a 3, you get a 2/2 for 3, then you pay 1 and turn up. You have a 3/2, but then you get to deal 3 damage. The damage can only be dealt to opponents, though. That's the tough part. If I could use it to get rid of opposing creatures, that would be pretty sweet, but also might make it too good. I don't know. This is a cool card, though. I could be talked into this being a thing, you know? I don't know, again, if there's enough for suspect or, I mean, disguise or whatever to be a thing, but maybe. If it is, this card's probably playable. If not, it's just a fun thing for limited. Here's another case. Look, all right. So, Case of the Stash Skeleton, 2 mana, so easy to play. When it enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token and suspect it. So it has menace and all that. You control no suspected skeletons. So you have to find a way to get that skeleton dead that you just made to solve this. All right. And then you pay 1 black and a colorless. Sacrifice this case. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle, activate only as a sorcery. So you're paying 2 mana for a 2/1 menace skeleton that can't block. And then at any point, if that skeleton doesn't exist, you can then tutor. I mean, okay, I'll say this. It's another skeleton card that's at least playable, right? Because we don't have a lot of skeletons right now. And we do have that enchantment that wants to pump skeletons and such. So we at least have a spot with something going on. So that's cool. Um, and you get to tutor. And honestly, let me say this. If you have a deck that cares about sacrificing creatures or whatever, then you're basically playing this to get a body that you can just chunk to get whatever effect you want. And then you have a card that's going to let you just tutor. That's actually pretty good, honestly. Like, again, you need some way to get rid of the token or something that cares about skeletons or whatever. But the upside on this is actually pretty strong. I could dig this. I don't know how good, but I definitely can see myself putting it into a couple of decks. All right, here's a very cool looking card. What even is this? It's a weird detective in the sky, apparently. All right, so it's a Steam Core Scholar, 3 mana for a 2/2, flying, vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. Then you discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or a sorcery card or a creature with flying. So 3 mana, 2/2, draw 2, flying, vigilance, and you discard 2 unless it's an instant sorcerer creature with flying. This feels playable. It's a little wild, but it's cool. All right. A 3 mana 2/2 doesn't sound great, but with flying and vigilance, it's all right. And you're getting 2 cards on top of it. I mean, there was a point in time when we were paying 3 mana just to look at 2 cards, you know? So 3 mana, we'll assume get 1 card because you'll discard 1, right? Unless they're like both lands, I guess, because you can build your deck around that. So 3 mana 2/2, draw a card, flying, vigilance. Really, I mean, to be fair, it is truly draw 2, though, because you might have junk in your hand you want to get rid of. So yeah, this card's actually okay. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's definitely not going to get laughed out of the building. And we just saw that other thing, the homunculus, that was a detective that wanted you to draw an extra card. These obviously go in the same deck. So yeah, there's already a start. Some basic lands. All right, here we go. Homicide Investigator. Here's another detective. 2 mana 2/2. Whenever one or more non-token creatures die, you investigate. This ability triggers only once each turn. This card is good. Now, does it go into a human deck, detective deck? I don't know. But it says when one or more non-token creatures, creatures you control. Okay, never mind. It's still decent, but not as good. When I was first reading, I thought it was just a creature dies. But it's a creature you control. And then you investigate. But the reality is you're going to likely, I'd imagine in a lot of scenarios, because not even each other creature dies, right? No, it's just one or more. So yeah, minimum this is going to be a 2/2 for 2 that I assume is going to create no less than 1 token most of the time. So yeah, I'm into this. And it happens both times, right? 1 per turn, which is also cool. So you can attack, and if something dies, you investigate. Then if you block and something dies, you investigate. So interesting. It's a cool card though. This one's pretty good. I definitely see that getting some play somewhere along the line. All right. This is Sharp Eyed Rookie. 2 mana, 2/2, human detective. So another detective here. Vigilance. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if its power was greater than Sharp Eyed Rookie's power or its toughness was greater than this card's toughness, put a +1/+1 counter on it and investigate. Okay. I mean, we've seen versions of this before. Play a bigger creature, get a counter. The difference here, though, is this also has vigilance, which is pretty sweet. And you get a +1 and a clue. So, yeah, this is likely going to get some play. Now, and what type of deck? I don't know. Does it go in just mono green and then just play bigger stuff and get +1/+1s? No clue. The funny thing is, this doesn't really work in the +1/+1 deck because so many of the cards you're playing in that deck are only going to be 2 power, right? They're 2 power with some other ability that puts counters on things. So not likely this goes in those decks. I guess unless you're playing the 4/4 with toxic that proliferates, right? Maybe that's a thing. But it's interesting. I need to figure out what to do with this. This is actually pretty neat. I dig it. Oh, guess what, y'all? I didn't even, as soon as I saw the title, I knew what this was going to be. No witnesses, two colorless white sorcery. Each player who controls the most creatures investigates, then destroy all creatures. I got to give my rant. Brace yourselves. You've heard this before if you're a fan of the channel, but if we're going to be in a 3-year standard, we don't need multiple sweepers in every single set. We just don't. Like, if we got one sweeper even every set from now on, we would still be rotating in and out 4 quality sweepers every time, right? It could be a white one, a black one, a red one, and then some gimmicky one, multicolor if you wanted to, even in that order. Just keep rotating. We would always have them available, right? We would always have 3 quality white ones, 3 quality black ones, 3 quality red ones, and then 3 quirky ones every single time from now on. We didn't even need to print this. Even now, this is going to exist alongside, hell, just in white. You still have Depopulate, you've got Sunfall, you've got Farewell. Like, we just don't like, and not only that, it's not even about worrying about playing against sweepers, because I don't think this is significantly better than the other ones that we already have access to. I mean, I guess a little better than Depopulate, because it's not, well, no, even then, you're guaranteed to give them a card in the form of a artifact, right? Because they're going to have more creatures, or you probably wouldn't be using this. So it may not even be better than Depopulate, right? So we're just wasting card slots in the sets, not doing anything fun and creative where we could have. Because, again, we already have like a billion other sweepers. Literally, I think we made a list at one time just before even the last 2 sets came out, and it was like 20 options or something. So I don't know. Like, this is just like, sure, it's there. Once we rotate to where Depopulate isn't playable, this probably gets played. But it's just like, meh. No, I don't think this card proves how 3-year standard was a last minute decision, honestly. I think this has just been the design plan. I think every set is just going to have a couple of sweepers in it. That's just a thing that has always existed. Somewhere R&D apparently believes this is a thing that we need. Like, I don't know why, but meh, it's a thing. But there we go. There's my rant on that. I just don't even know why it exists, but it does. This is an uncommon. So, Case of the Gorgon's Kiss. Just 1 black for a case. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature that was dealt damage this turn. Oh, so this is like a removal. This is kind of cool. And then to solve it, you need 3 or more creature cards put into the graveyard from anywhere this turn. And then this is a 4/4 Gorgon with Death Touch and Lifelink in addition to its other types. Interesting. I don't know how we guaranteed get 3 creatures into the graveyard, but if you had a big combat go down, maybe some tokens or some 2/2s or something got blocked, then you play this and kill off the big thing. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of ways you could make this happen. This wouldn't be too difficult. And for 1 mana, getting to kill off a bigger creature that blocked and get a 4/4 with Lifelink and Death Touch, this is pretty playable. I mean, it's a little gimmicky, don't get me wrong. Like, your opponent needs to block for you to be able to kill something. But even if I don't ever get the 4/4, it's passable. I don't know if I'm stacking 4 of these in my deck, but I might play 2 of these. I'm kind of okay with that. Bill says all those nice sweepers help this along. Yeah, kind of. I mean, they sweep the board. I mean, it's not, I guess technically those are sorceries, so they do it on their turn, so you wouldn't be able to do this, I guess. If they had some kind of instant speed fun thing, then maybe. That's true. It just says 3 or more creature cards are put into graveyards from anywhere. So you're right. You could mill stuff and do that as well. There's a whole series of these lands, which enter the battlefield tapped, and then you can surveil 1. These obviously are going to draw comparisons to the temples, from Theros, but these are fine. I will say this: the fact that they have 2 basic creature type or land types on them is pretty nice, because they're searchable with different things, which is cool. Because a lot of things that like go get a forest card, or, go search for a swamp, that sort of thing. So it's actually pretty cool. Surveil actually does matter too, though, right? If you're playing anything that wants to collect evidence, you're playing anything that cares about uh, reanimating things, stuff like that, right? Being able to surveil and put extra cards in the graveyard is going to be fantastic. Even the Sultai decks that are trying to reanimate stuff, they might want a card like this. So these are pretty. They do come into play tapped always, so you kind of have to decide how many tap lands you want or whatever. But these are playable. I wouldn't immediately turn my nose up at them. War Leader's Call, colorless, red, white. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever creature enters the battlefield under your control, War Leader's Call deals 1 damage to each opponent. Yeah, this is quality. I mean, obviously, red, white, aggro stuff wants it. Token decks can splash red and put this in with all the different lands that are available. You're already playing variations of Boros or humans with like Animpakal, Adeline, right? Like that all makes sense. That's just bonus damage from your creatures. Yeah, just a quality card. I mean, even if you didn't get a ton of extra, like if you didn't even draw another creature, I mean, all your stuff getting +1/+1 is also cool, having a quality anthem. But there is upside here because if they don't get rid of this, then every creature that comes into play is at least some number of damage. So that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, just a good card. Kind of wacky art going on, but cool card for sure. What is this? Vol'jao, Jaws of the Conclave. For 2 red, green, white. It's a 5/5 for 5. It's a big legendary wolf. Has vigilance, trample, ward. All right, so it's already 5 for a 5/5 with 3 good abilities, and ward 3 is hard to remove. And then when it attacks, put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control. Draw a card for each wolf. Wow. Okay. Wait. All right. So when it attacks, you get to put X counters on it on each creature you control, where X is the number of wolves or number of elves you control. But then you draw a card for each wolf you control. So this is probably going to be the only wolf in the deck, right? And it doesn't have haste, so your opponent gets a turn to deal with your board. But if they don't, and you have even like 3 elves, well, then you attack. All your elves are getting +3/+3. No, it's on each creature, not on each elf. So then this becomes an 8/8 on top of it with vigilance and trample, and then you get a bonus card. This card's solid. I don't know if I'm gonna say good because I mean elves are not great, but elves have needed something to help push them up a little bit. So this could be one of the things. But even by itself, it's a 5/5. It gets to attack, draw a card, vigilance and ward 3. Like this is cool. Like this is pretty interesting. I don't know. This is a thing. Um for clarification, call plus Ashnal. Here's the problem with that. Is the Ashnal decks don't have all that many creatures. Not saying you can't build a version that does, but I mean I've built versions that had as few as like 12 creatures because you need so many spells really to trigger everything else, right? Because we're playing stuff depending on which version you're playing, whether you're playing the one we just put up a couple days ago with the white in it, and even then, you're trying to take advantage of more spells there, or are you playing the mono red version, and then in that case, you're not even really playing the War Leader's Call. So I think it still can be used in there. Don't get me wrong. Maybe you play like 2 copies or something, but there are things that care specifically about instants and sorceries, and that's an enchantment. So you would lose the opportunity to trigger some things depending. So it would kind of just depend. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Like, tokens obviously trigger the other card. Are the pre-release cards in the collector's boosters? No, there are some cards, I believe 4 of them or 3, that are exclusive just to pre-release kits. They will only be available there. They're not part of the regular set. The idea is putting something really sweet to entice you to go to a pre-release, or people have something at least worth value, leaving the pre-release that they can trade or sell or whatever. So, pretty cool thing. Are they standard legal? I believe they are, yes. But you are not able to play with them in your pre-release kits. They will be in there. You can't play them in the pre-release because they didn't want to My understanding is they didn't want to affect the deck building because everybody would try to build around those or whatever. But you will be able to play them in standard, as I understand it. All right, what else we got? We have a new Trostani. 3 mana, so green, white, and split mana for a 4/4. So that's pretty good. And then you can pay 2, target creature gains death touch, or like a green and a colorless, or you can pay 1 split mana, target creature gains vigilance, or you can pay 2 and a white, target creature gains double strike. Yeah, this card's just solid. I don't know if this is a like what type of aggro deck wants this, but a 3 mana 4/4 with 3 quality abilities, one of them being vigilance, one of them being double strike at instant speed, is pretty good. Pretty good. Hard to argue against this. This is a quality card. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet, but I'm probably playing like 2 copies and something that's aggressive. I say that. If I'm playing tokens, probably not because it doesn't really fit that whole thing. But if I'm playing just aggro, green, white, you know, aggro Naya or something, this probably would make the cut. Because there's just so many cool things. The other thing too is you can give multiple things death touch. You can give multiple things double strike, right? Because none of these tap. These are all just like, all right, I can pay 3 mana. My whole team has vigilance this turn. I'm attacking. Right. And then if they decide to block, you're like, oh yeah, and here's 2 more mana to give one of the things you block death touch. Yeah, this card's pretty silly. Like, I'm kind of into this. This card's I think the card's actually solid. It doesn't give counters, but might fit nicely inside. It could. I mean, just to give counters death touch, so your opponent doesn't want to block them or something. And it is a big body. I mean, there's that. The Optimator, yo 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 to you too, sir. All right, so Tomic, Wielder of Law, colorless white black for a 2/4, has affinity for planeswalkers, so it costs 1 less to cast for each planeswalker you control, so possibly only costs 2. All right, flying vigilance. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and/or planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. Okay, so you pay. I'm gonna assume in most cases you're paying 3 mana for a 2/4 with flying and vigilance, quality. And then if your opponent attacks with 2 things, they lose 3 and you draw a card. All right, I could be talked into this. It's just solid. I mean, good sized body, 4 toughness is big. Likely going to get a card at least in 3 life, unless they just spot remove it, I guess. But this is cool. How many of these you play? I don't know. I mean, it's legendary. Can probably go into some black white humans list or something. But yeah, it's a cool card. Definitely one that like you're not going to enjoy your opponent having out on the battlefield. Because here's the other thing. Like, let's say it's later in the game, your opponent draws this, and you're only at, I don't know, let's say 7 or less life. Well, now if you attack, you could be getting attacked back because he already flies, so that's 2, right? So you take damage when you attack. You go down to from 7 to 4. He's already 2, so you're practically dead and can't attack again until you get rid of this card. So it has real impact. Like this card really does something. Like now that I'm thinking about it, this card's kind of annoying. It's really good. All right. There's a new Tulsamere. Midnight's Light. 2 green, white, white for a 3/2 elf scout with lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, you make a Voja Finstalker, legendary 5/5 green, white wolf with trample. And then whenever a wolf you control attacks, if Tulsamere attacks this combat, target creature an opponent controls blocks that wolf this combat if able. So you're paying 5 mana to get a 3/2 and a 5/5. The 3/2 has lifelink, the 5/5 has trample. And then if you attack with both creatures, you can make something block the wolf. All right, this is cool. I mean, it's a 5/5, and I mean, you're getting 8 power worth of creatures split with lifelink and trample for 5 mana. this is the type of card I like to have even one of sometimes, because if I draw it late, then it's like, oh, look, I have at least two bodies now, right? So you can't just top deck like one removal and get out of trouble. However, here's a very interesting thing I just thought of. Remember how we just talked about the actual Voja card itself? It also was like, oh, remember you draw a card for each wolf? Well, this makes an elf and a wolf. So then if you actually have the other Voja, then you get to draw an extra card when you attack. So yeah, elves and wolves, I guess that's a thing. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it now. But this is a fun card. I like this card. What else do we have here? A new Teysa, it looks like. Teysa, Opulent Oligarch. Colorless white black. 2/3. Death touch. At the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and white spirit creature token with flying. That ability triggers only once each turn. Ooh. This is a fun card. Also, we're seeing a pattern. Black-white humans might actually be a thing. But this is pretty cool because one, she has death touch, so that's going to slow your opponent down. If you're doing anything that investigates or makes clues in some way, well, then as you're sacking clues, you can also sack on your turn and your opponent's turn because it's only triggers once each turn, so you can get the extra spirits. And then if the spirits get through and connect, you get to make another clue, which turns into another spirit, and so on and so on. So, yeah, this is good. I mean, there's really not a lot to say about this card. It's just good. I mean, 2/3 death touch with upside. If your opponent lost any life, could be combat, could be anything. You get to investigate, and then you get to start making more spirits. Like, yeah, this card's solid. The other thing fun about this card is you could have those clues just sitting there too. Then Teysa shows up. Then you start spending your mana to get those cards and get the 1/1s. Let's see. Here's another elf. Does this one do anything? 2 mana, 1/3 for a Samala Sentry. It's an elf archer. It has reach. Whenever face down permanent you control is turn face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it and this card. All right, if you're doing the face up, face down thing, but I don't think this goes into the elf decks we would be trying to build, unfortunately. What is this? This is Scene of the Crime enters battlefield tapped. Taps for a colorless. You can tap an untapped creature you control, add a mana of any color, sacrifice it. Okay, you can draw a card. That's cool. But this is mostly for a limited as a color fixer. And you get to draw a card late. That's fine. Look and see what else there is here. Let's look at No More Lies. Yes, this is getting a lot of hype right now. 2 mana, so it's a white-blue instant counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, which is basically an old school mana leak. If that spell's countered this way, exile it instead. Like, my issue with this card is, why does it have to exile? We were in a set where you could have investigated, right, and let you draw a card later. But it's like one more thing that exiles. Like, we keep doing that with so many cards, which unfortunately makes a lot of other stuff. Like, without things going to the graveyard, your like collect evidence doesn't do much. Your reanimator stuff doesn't do much, right? And I'm okay with hindering strategies because you have to have defenses to the strategies. But like, when everything is keeping stuff from going to the graveyard, we're turning off like a third of the cool things people can do. That aside, this is probably going to become the main removal or counter spell once we lose Make Disappear in, I think, at the end of this year. I'd have to go back and look. So this could actually make a lot of sense. Older formats, obviously, you like Mana Leak, you get to play this, and you get to exile the card, so that's even better. I think in Standard, it's good. I don't know if it's what you would say. People think it's busted, but we kind of are already leaving a bunch of mana open, playing around Make Disappears as it is, oftentimes leaving 4 mana where we can. So I don't think this changes things all that much on that front, but it is a really good card. I definitely expect this to be popular. Probably going to be one of those uncommons that eventually gets to like $1.50, $2 because it's getting played in older formats. What is this? Night Drinker Mori. Morai? Moroi. I don't even know how you pronounce that. of 4 mana, so 3 colorless and a black for a 4/2 vampire with flying. Enters the battlefield, you lose 3 life? Oh, I see. So you can put it face down, so then you can turn it up for 2, and then you don't lose the 3 life. But if you play 4 mana, you get a 4/2 fly. Yeah, this is bad. you We don't need to be wasting time on this type of card. If it had some other ability, I don't know, lifelink, that type something maybe, but like, I don't know. Yeah, just yeah, not feeling it. Again, for limited, maybe. For standard, no. Um, these are just like random questions. How do I feel about like? Here's the thing: I'm a terrible person to ask that type of thing too, because for 2 reasons. One, I don't know if it really matters, so I don't put a lot of thought into that type of question. I mean, if I thought the power level was a 9 or I think it's a 7, there's still cards we're going to be playing with in standard. I think we make a conversation out of that too much in the community when it doesn't have any bearing on much of anything for the average player. The other is I'm terrible when it comes to hot takes. I just don't have enough of an opinion. I mostly just go, hey, there's a lot of cool cards. Let's see what we could build with them, more than anything else. But I mean, it's fine. I think it's just where we expect it. It's not crazy over the top. I don't think it's crazy over the bot or under the floor, I guess. It's not hitting the ceiling, but it's not punching through the basement. It's somewhere in the middle. Melik, Reforge Researcher, 3 colorless, blue red, weird detective. Has power and toughness equal to twice the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. The first instant or sorcery card spell you cast each turn costs 3 less to cast. This is cool. Again, you want more things in the graveyard, so hopefully you're doing that. But if you're already on that kind of wavelength doing that stuff, this is cool. I think it's a neat card. I mean, how big is it going to be most of the time? I mean, probably paying 5 for like a 6/6 or so. The problem though is, are you playing other cards that are also using stuff out of your graveyard? Because we saw that vehicle. I mean, at this point, like almost 2 hours ago. But the vehicle that's also playing stuff or exiling stuff out of the yard kind of makes this smaller, but they do fit into the same type of deck. So that's a thing. So I don't know. It's a neat card. Is it super good? No, but if you're playing that type of deck, I'm probably playing 2 copies. Massacre Girl. 4 mana, 4/4 with Menace. Human Assassin. Again, another card that can go in the Black-White Humans deck. Creatures you control have Wither, which is awesome. So it means whenever they deal damage in the form of -1/-1 encounters. And then if a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, meaning it had some number of -1/-1 counters on it that killed it, you draw a card. This is just a cool design for a card. Honestly, I think this is cool. It's a 4 mana 4/4. It's got Menace, so it's a real body. Your creatures are super annoying now for your opponent, right? Because even your little ones are still shrinking their creatures. And then if you do have something die because it had minuses on it, you get to draw a card. So yeah, all around, yeah, this is playable. For sure. I don't have a problem with this card at all. Roro Loco Wasteland says, holy snap, a PowrDragn stream. Well, hey, I'm glad you're excited. What else do we got? There's a lot of cool cards in the set, though, I have to say. We've seen a lot of interesting things, a lot of different ways to build stuff, which is always cool. What do we have here? This is a 2 mana instant, Long Goodbye. The spell can't be countered. This includes, oh, they actually put it in quotes. I don't think I've seen this word. This includes by the ward ability. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. All right, just another quality early removal. Nothing crazy, just a decent card. Krenko, Baron of 10 Street, 3 mana, 3/3. Legendary creature, Goblin. Has haste, which is awesome. 3/3 with haste, great. Sacrifice an artifact. Put a +1/+1 counter on each goblin you control, which means you could play this, tap it, put a +1 on everything, including itself, because it's not each other goblin, it's just each goblin. So you have a 4/4 now. And then whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a red. If you do, you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. It has haste until end of turn. Wow. So if you had like, okay, let's say you play Krenko and you've got 3 treasure just hanging out, because that's not that unreal. Then you could sacrifice each treasure. Each of those would create a 1/1 red goblin, right? Because you spent a red that you could make a red, and then well, you could do that twice, and then you could sacrifice the last one to put a +1/+1 on those things. So now you have a bunch of 2/2s. Yeah, Krenko's silly. Great. Like you have to like think about it of all the things you could do, but there are some different things you could do with goblins right now. And I felt like goblins were a card or two away from being just playable as goblins. And this could be one of them. I think the issue here would just be deciding where or how you want to work in artifacts or treasure. Otherwise, you just have Kranko as like a 3/3 haster, and that's not really enough. But I mean, maybe there's got to be a way. It really just needs more thought, but there's definitely a way. What else are we looking at here? This is a Crow Whipcracker. Green black for a 3/2 insect assassin. Pretty cool. It has reach. Awesome. Enters the battlefield, destroy target token and opponent control. This is just a good card. 2 mana, 3/2 with reach, and you get to kill a token. I mean, even if you don't get to kill anything, it's just a 3/2 with reach for 2. That's fine. Like, yeah, this is solid. I mean, it's not like game breaking, but you know, just a good solid card. Kellen. This is like, is this the third set in a row we got at Kellen? I feel like third or fourth. I don't know. There's just a lot of Kellens now. 2 colors, green, blue, 3/4 flying vigilance. Whenever it attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If you controlled that permanent, you draw a card. All right. And then tell the suspect is a blue-green sorcery adventure. Investigate. So you make a clue. And you can play an additional land for the turn. All right. This is solid. I mean, in a way, it kind of enables itself, right? Like on turn 2, you investigate, you put a land into play. Turn 3, you can play this as a 3/4 with flying and vigilance. That has upside. And then you can attack, not even spend the mana. You can just destroy your own clue and draw the card. So I don't know. This is cool. Definitely playable, at least. Kind of interesting. He's like Monkey D. Luffy. I don't even know what or who that is. I'll have to Google it later, I guess. I hope that's not something foul that I just put on screen. We're following the adventures of Kellen across the plains. I guess so. I mean, that's cool. I didn't know that was a thing. I just realized these are showing up everywhere. All right, so it looks like Kaya is our planeswalker for the set. So we got Kaya, Spirit's Justice, 2 colorless, green, black, 3 loyalty, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control and or creature cards in your graveyard are put into exile, you may choose a creature card from among them. Until end of turn, target token you control becomes a copy except it has flying. My goodness. Okay. So before we get into our actual abilities, our static ability is whenever 1 or more creatures you control and or creature cards in your graveyard are put into exile. So if a creature goes from your graveyard into exile or something you have in play goes to exile, you can choose a creature card from among all of those, it sounds like. And until end of turn, target token you control becomes a copy of it. So you need a token first. And then until end of turn, that token becomes a thing. All right. So now you can +2 loyalty. Surveil 2, which puts something into the graveyard or whatever. Then you exile a card from your graveyard. So that's where one of them can go. And then +1, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. Interesting, because the token already has flying. And then -2, exile target creature you control. For each other player, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. So you get rid of one of yours and you get rid of one of theirs. Okay, that's interesting. This is a weird one because, like, loyalty is very small, right? You do turn it into a 4 loyalty by +1ing to get a blocker, but it is a very small blocker. It does fly, though, which is nice. Surveil 2, you can put stuff in the graveyard, exile a thing, so you could turn your 1/1 into a bigger thing for a turn. I think the interesting thing here is just going to be what are you playing alongside Kaya to turn your tokens into something of quality, right? Like, I don't know what that other thing is at the moment or what that would look like, but I feel like the deck has to be almost like we're saying, like a normal black white humans deck that happens to also be playing Kaya. Wait, actually, mm, you know what? Maybe that's exactly what you're doing with this. Really, because you also have Tesa who wants to make spirits and that whole thing. So like maybe this all falls into that same space. Hmm. Interesting. It's a neat card, but I think maybe that's it. It's just you're already playing a decent creature deck or something, and this is just supplementing that in some way. But yeah, solid. Don't think it's crazy at this point in time, though. All right, we got Judith, Carnage Carnosaur, 3 colorless, red, black, 3/4. Human Shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is pretty good. This is scary if it sits around for any amount of time, right? First off, all your burn spells now have Death Touch. That's pretty tough, right? Because now even like your 1 or 2 damage thing can just kill whatever your opponent has. The life link's a bonus, but just getting the stuff out of the way is a big deal. How often you would make the imps, I don't know, but it could also be a thing where if you're playing against a control deck late and you have this, you're like, okay, cool, during your step, I'm just gonna play with fire you. All right. So then you scry and you're like, and I'm gonna make an imp. So now if they do have a sweeper and the imp dies, they're gonna take 2 anyway from that thing attacking. Or if you have a way to sacrifice or kill your own imps, those are extra damage too. So this is a cool card. 3/4 for 5, but the upside is worth it. You're playing this all for the upside on the other spells you have coming behind it. But pretty cool card though. Izoni, Center of the Web. This probably has something to do with spiders. 4 colorless, green, black for a 5/4 with menace. Elf Detective. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can collect evidence 4. If you do, create 2/1 black green spider tokens. Yep. With menace and reach. You can sacrifice 4 tokens to surveil 2, then draw 2 cards. You gain 2. Ooh, okay. I like this. This is cool. It's a lot of mana. Don't get me wrong. A lot of mana for a 5/4 menace, but you immediately can collect evidence of 4, which is going to be pretty easy. You get 2 spiders with menace and reach. So you get 2/2/1s and a 5/4 for 6 mana. Pretty much always. There would be some corner cases where it doesn't happen, but I'm going to say pretty much always. And then if you just have other tokens of various types, because there's a lot of ways to make tokens right now, you can then sacrifice tokens, surveil 2, draw 2, gain 2 life. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I think you only play a couple of these in a deck. It's legendary. It costs 6, but it is cool. I mean, being able to just build a whole board off of one card is pretty nice. You know, can't wait to use new Kaya to toss Yargle or Multani. Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, what are the biggest things you want to do to turn 1/1s into giant things? But I don't know. Maybe it's too gimmicky. All right. Getting close to the end here, I think. What else do we have here? It doesn't add up. 3 colorless, black, black for an instant. Return target creature card from a graveyard to the battlefield. Suspect it. All right. I mean, it's another reanimate spell. We have like 5 or 6 playable ones right now. While it's nice to give it menace, I think more often than not, you don't want to use this one because there are a lot of times you're getting something into play and you do want it to be able to block. I mean, being instant's really cool. I mean, though we have one other one that you can also get it to be an instant. But I don't think this is bad by any stretch. But I think it's going to come down to what the format looks like and what you're reanimating. on if you can afford for the thing to not be able to block more often than not. I think it's going to be the decision there for at least for me when I'm deck building. It's going to be how often do I think I'm going to need to block? Then I'm probably playing something else. Otherwise, instant speed's pretty nice, and it is going to be hard to block whatever you get. Galvanize comes back, which is pretty cool. Just looking to see if there's anything else that's worth having fun talks about. There's a new Atrata. Atrata Deadly Fugitive. Colorless blue black. 1/4 with death touch. Vampire Assassin. Face down creatures you control have 2 blue black, turn face up. If you can't exile it, then you may cast the exiled card without paying its cost. Weird. So face down creatures you control have pay 4, turn this creature face up. If you can't turn it face up for some reason, I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to, you exile it and then you just cast it. And then whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. Well, that's fun, just being able to build an assassin deck. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess if it's a land that's face down, like if it's a spell, you get to cast it. If it's a land, it just stays as a 2/2. So it's an interesting card. I don't know how I feel about this. It's very quirky. Like you're gambling that your opponent has something good on top that you can use for 4. How many assassins are we playing to even take advantage to be able to turn their stuff face down? There were a couple of assassins in this set, so could be doable. I don't really know. I haven't put that much thought into it yet. This is I'm gonna not have I don't have a real opinion on this card. I think I need to see the totality of the set to figure out if there's enough assassins to even make this a relevant thing. I feel like I'd just be chasing upside on that too often. Here's a fun name card, Dog Walker. It's a red and a white for a human citizen, vigilance. It has disguise of only 2, which is cool. When it's turn face up, create 2 tapped 1/1 white dog creature tokens, and it's a 3/1 otherwise. Yeah, I can dig this. If I'm playing some type of human aggro deck, Boros colors, you get a 3/1. That's fine. Later in the game, you get a 3/1 and 2 1/1s. I could work with that. Not killer, but good. What is this right next to it? Deadly Complication. Colorless black red. Choose one or both. As a sorcery, destroy target creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on target suspected creature you control. You may have it become no longer suspected. Okay, so this is a 3 mana, kill a creature, and put a +1/+1 on something and have it be suspected or not, if it's already suspected. This is playable. I mean, I don't know. Like, obviously, we have a bunch of really good instant speed removal, so it's possible you don't even play this. But if you are already playing suspect stuff, then maybe this becomes a card you do want to play. Kind of cool, though. Yeah, this one was kind of obvious when they previewed this one. Crime Novelist, 3 mana, 1/3. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Add 1. Obviously, if you have treasure, right, you just sack the treasure. This gets a 1/1, add a mana, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a lot of fun things you can do with this. You can find a couple of ways to go infinite, creating treasure, using the mana, putting counters on this. So, like, yeah, there's going to be some silly things this is going to end up doing, I'm sure. Let's see. Question: does a disguised creature retain auras and equipments when it's flipped? Yes, it doesn't leave the battlefield. It just turns face up. Just like old morph cards did. What else are we doing here? Let's see. We have Case of the Ransacked Lab. It's a 3 mana case. Instant and sorcery spells you control cost less. So that's already going to make some people happy. If you cast 4 or more instants and sorcery spells in a turn, you can solve this. That's going to be a little more difficult. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. However, the upside and the payoff is huge. Yeah. Yeah, this. Yeah, this card's got to be playable. Making all your stuff cheaper does make it possible for you to be able to play 4 things in a turn. And then every time you play something, you're just drawing cards. And then it's just like this infinite cycle of stuff, effectively. It's like, yeah, this is. Yeah, this card's going to be concerning if it pops off. I think it takes some setup, but once it does, oh boy, that's a real thing. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I saw this. This is Axebane Ferox, 4/4 for 4. Death Touch Haste, Ward of Collect Evidence 4. This is a very interesting card because the 4 mana and 5 mana slots in a lot of decks is very, very tight. But in this case, you get a 4/4 haste, which is cool. I like haste creatures, obviously. After sweepers, being able to get in there, awesome. But the ward of Collect Evidence 4 really does matter, right? Because think about something like even, let's say, Celestial Enchantments. There's a lot of times that their play is just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to pay 2 and I'm going to Ossification, right? But there's nothing in their graveyard. So now their decision is, well, do I trade 2 or 3 creatures for this? Because that's going to be the only way to kill it in the immediate couple of turns. Otherwise, they're just chumping off every turn, right? You can't easily just go for the throat this on the early turns, right? So if you go turn 2 mana creature, turn 3 this thing, that is a real problem. This is a real issue. Oh, there's several things that eat graveyards as well. To Blueton's point, like that's a real thing, right? There's several things that eat stuff out of the graveyard right now. Like this card is legit. I mean, you could have your 4 mana slot be this and Uvenwald Oddity, right? So it's just 4/4 hasters with upside. Take your pick, right? One has late game stuff. One is better to have early, but so that's a real option. But yeah, having hasters practically guaranteed that are hard to deal with, like this is something. I don't know. This is a wild one. Is it good enough to push mono green over the top? I think that's going to be the question, right? And I think it's going to take more than just this one card, but I do think this card at least starts you on that path because you needed something else that's hard to deal with that forces your opponent to do some things to get rid of it other than trade, right? Because this does have Death Touch, so they can't even just be like, all right, well, on my turn 4, I'm playing Shieldred. You're like, great, whatever. I'm still attacking for 4. Shieldred can block or not. We'll trade up. I don't care. Right? So, yeah, this could be a real card. It's quirky, but could be really cool. Also one where I like this art, the full art, better. Like, it's kind of hard to tell even what the other thing is. Let's see. What else do we got here? Oh, yeah, this thing. I actually kind of like this. I saw this earlier. So Aurelia's Vindicator. 4 mana, 4/2. Flying lifelink ward, ward 2. Has disguise of 4 mana X. And when it's turn face up, exile up to X other target creatures from the battlefield or creature cards from graveyards. And then when it leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hand. Cool part is you can target your own things in the graveyard, and then whenever this dies, you could get those things back. But otherwise, it's just like, all right, I have this 4/2 flying lifelink ward thing. Seems solid, right? I'm okay with this. It's not stellar, but I think it is playable and pretty cool. And another card, if you want to do angels, we got a couple of angels in this set that could help push that up over the top a little bit. Not a lot to say on Assassin's Trophy. This card has existed before. It's played in older formats. It's a good removal. Expect to see a lot of it. Occasionally, you're going to get to search for some basics. Don't forget to put some basic lands into your decks. It's kind of the short selling point there. Some people seem really excited about this. Analyze the pollen as an additional cost to cast this. You can collect evidence 8, and you search the library for a basic land. If you did collect the evidence, you instead search for a creature or a land, and you reveal the card and put it into your hand. A 1 mana tutor, especially later in the game, again, if you're talking about mono green, it's like, all right, you've lost some number of creatures already, probably more than 8 costs worth of things. You can go ahead and for 1, search out your best thing, play that the next turn. This is, if again, mono green is a thing, this will likely get some amount of play. And if nothing else, it's just like early on, just go search for another land or whatever. Hey, we got a new member. Thank you, Fat Marv. I feel bad saying that, but hey, if that's your name, that's your name. Hey, Fat Marv, thanks for becoming a YouTube member. Much appreciated. What else do we got here? Argus Koss, Spirit of Justice, 4 mana, so 2 red white for a 2/4, double strike vigilance. That's a lot for 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it's suspected, exile it. Otherwise, suspect it. Oh, that's cool. So it comes into play, makes something a suspect. So it can't block, but then it gains menace. But then if it attacks, you can now just exile that creature. Ooh, and it's double strike and vigilance. This is a cool card. I don't know how good it is, but it is a detective, so that might matter. But yeah, I like what this card's doing. It's kind of crafty. I dig it. What else do we got going on here? I saw this actually, so I'm just going to mention it. But it's a 5 mana enchantment. Killer Among Us enters the battlefield. You make a 1/1 white human, a 1/1 blue merfolk, a 1/1 red goblin, and then you choose one of them, and then sacrifice this, reveal the chosen one, and then that thing gets 3 +1/+1 counters on it and gains death touch. So basically, you'll get a 4/4 and 2 1/1s for 5 mana. One of the things has death touch. That's a lot of tokens, but it's also a lot of mana. I don't know what this would even do. I mean, and they're not even matching creature types. Like, I don't know. This is neat, but this feels like a lot of work. I mean, yeah, a lot of things can work with Panharmonicon type effects. I just don't know if there's a world where you're going to have that much mana and that much time, and you've kept your other things in play. I think it'd be fun if you want to build something cool and just, play it in the play queue or something. Don't know if I'd be looking to ladder or something like that. Other surprises, Lightning Helix is back. If you've seen my recent videos, I have a couple of decks this is already going to go in. Already queued them up, and I have my Lightning Helixes ready to play in paper standard, actually. Yeah, here's another angel, which I like in this set quite a lot. It's a 3 mana Wojek Investigator, 2/4 Angel Detective, also a detective. Has flying and vigilance, which is great. So you get to attack and block with the 4 toughness creature. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, if somebody has more cards than you, you get to investigate. And you investigate once for each opponent who has more cards. So if you play this in something like Commander and your opponents have more cards than you can get multiple clues. Otherwise, in one-on-one, if your opponent has more cards than you get to make a clue as well. Not often you're going to get to do a ton of clues with this, but any amount is cool, and it's just upside. But for 3 mana, 2/4 flying vigilance, and you possibly get more cards, I can dig this. This is cool. What I also like is if you notice there's a fair amount of things with vigilance in this set, which also means those things don't get hit by Wandering Emperor or what you call it, Elspeth Smite, all that type of stuff that we've been seeing a lot of. There anything else? There's Rakdos, Patron of Chaos, 4 colorless, black red, 6/6, flying trample. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice 2 non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, you draw 2 cards. Yeah, this is just good. I mean, like, at the beginning of your end step, target opponent. So in Commander, it's not every opponent, it's target opponent. But this is 6/6 flying trampler, and your opponent just has to start sacking stuff until they can't, and then you just get to start drawing cards, which is kind of awesome. So yeah, I'm probably going to lose some number of games with this card, but it's neat though. What else do we have that was fun here to talk about? Did we see most of the neat stuff? Oh no, that's not true. There's Aurelia, the Law Above, 3 colorless, red white, 4/4. Angel, obviously, Flying, Vigilance, Haste. So you get 4/4 Flying, Vigilance, Haste for 5 mana. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more, Aurelia deals 3 to each of your opponents and you gain 3 life. Okay, this is solid. If I'm already playing something with a lot of creatures, again, doing the, I don't know, Boros aggro thing, maybe I'm doing a tokens aggro deck that can afford this, then it's like, all right, I get to draw a card every time I attack, or I also get to deal 3 and draw a card. So that's cool. Like, it's fine. Not like crazy. Not, I don't think, obviously not as good as the other Aurelias, giving you like extra attack steps and stuff, but still some upside for some longevity, letting you draw a card and drain your opponent, gain some life. Let's see. We have Alquist Prof, Master Sleuth, colorless blue white for a 3/3, obviously a detective. Vigilance, enters a battlefield, you investigate. You can pay X white blue blue, tap it, sacrifice a clue, you draw X cards and gain X life. Oh boy. Wow. 3 mana 3/3 with vigilance, and you get a clue. Later in the game, this card's sick. Right? Like if this just sits there and you don't get rid of it, let's say against some control deck, right? And they're sitting on a couple of clues. Like this isn't, why does this not have to be used as a sorcery? I'm just realizing this. We have all these other abilities over the last couple of sets that are like good but not great, but they all have to be used as a sorcery. This one gives you cards and life, and you can just wait, just do it during your opponent's end step, spend as much mana as you want. So like you just pay, let's say 7, because that's not an unreal number. So you gain 4 life, get 4 cards. Like this is really good. And like if it lives long enough for you to get 1 quality activation, that's already stellar. Right? This card's really good. Like, wow. That, yeah. Okay. That's a card we'll have to know about. And I think we covered everything. All right, cool. I think we did it. We got through all the major cards that have been previewed so far. Oh my gosh, that was so many. But not too bad. We got a lot of them done in what, about 2.5 hours? Yeah, right at 2 hours, 31 minutes. And well, 2 hours, 20 minutes, because it took about 10 or 11 to get started. So that's not bad. I guess now, if you have a chance, no matter what platform you're on, do you have any questions or any cards you want to know about? Are you curious how anything works that we may have missed or didn't discuss that I didn't catch? This set doesn't excite me too much. I think Roro, every time I hear this from somebody for any set, it's usually because you either, and this is an insult to you, this is just like players as a whole, either they haven't found cards that go into the type of decks they like, or they haven't figured out all the ways to use a lot of the cards. And I think that's been a case over the last, I would say 4 or 5 sets is we've been getting cards that are very unique or work in weird ways. And a lot of times it's hard for people to go like, what am I going to do with this? Like, this doesn't even feel like it does anything. And then once you see it and the light bulb clicks, you're like, oh, well now I can go build these 3 or 4 decks with this card. I feel like I see that a lot. There is a green rare case I think you missed. I may not have missed it. I may have just not talked about it. But let's go see. Let's put in creature type case and see what we can find. If I see it, we will talk about it. Green, and let's see what comes up. Nope, there's only one that I've seen. Anything else that's not an official preview, I don't talk about on the channel. And people have asked why I don't discuss those in my Discord or whatever, or on my videos. The thing is, if they're not official and been previewed, one, there's been too many times those cards aren't actually real. The other is people do spend a lot of time doing fun preview videos. Some people are spending money to make costumes and pay an editor and all this stuff. And I don't want to contribute to taking away anybody's shine or thunder or whatever when they're putting in time to do a really fun preview thing. Let's see. What do you think in general of the disguise mechanic? It's fine. We played Morph before. It's just fine. It's really about individual cards more than it is the mechanic. Dumb question. I doubt it. When you flip a card, does it have summoning sickness? Still a newer player. That's not a dumb question at all. But no, it doesn't have summoning sickness. Since it's not leaving the battlefield or entering the battlefield, it's already there. It's just a new version or a it's almost like it's the same card, it just has new words on it. So it didn't really leave the battlefield, so it doesn't have summoning sickness. That wasn't a dumb question at all. Any other questions? I'm sure these have been pretty good ones. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot to do with the set. I think there's some things too, though. We still have what I think 4 more days worth of previews, 5 more days. So I mean, it's going to be: are there more detectives? What things are going to fill in kind of the archetypes that we're pushing toward building? Whether it's the is it spells deck, big mono green stuff, more stuff with instigate or investigate. I don't know why I said instigate. Investigate. Are there other types where we're talking about elves, wolves, goblins? Because those have shown up a lot in this set. I mean, I'm already in my head thinking about like 10 different things to possibly build right out of the gate. Do I see a blue-green deck coming together with the new cards you have seen so far? That's a very broad question. I mean, blue-green kind of already exists in a few different builds. I mean, like pseudo reanimator type stuff. There's some Simic ramp things doing stuff. So I think it just depends on what you're trying to have the deck do more than anything else, realistically. I don't think it's just about color combos. I think people ask those questions a lot, like, whoa, is this type of deck available? Or can you build it? I'm like, okay, but what are we doing with it, right? What cards are we trying to include? Because to even say like mono red's a thing is like, well, sort of. There's mono red aggro, there's mono red burn, there's like the Ashenil whatever type stuff. There's the big red that plays Koth and the Planeswalkers, right? So like there's a bunch of different ways things go. Now, if we're talking about a whole new thing, then we need to talk about certain cards, right? Where we're talking about like elves, because this set, I'm gonna do a quick search here in a Scryfall just for elf, and even with just what's been previewed, which means there's probably going to be more of them. I'm just going to put in creature type elf and what's available in Murders of Karlov Manor. Okay, so we saw oh wait, I need to put all colors because that's a thing. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 new elves. Now that being said, realistically, Izoni could probably be the top end if you want to play a one of. Like 3 of them, 4 of them probably aren't even under consideration. So really right now you're only getting Izoni maybe and Tulsamir from what we've had previewed so far. But actually that's not true. There's one we didn't talk about here. Let me bring this up actually. This one's random. This was Vidugazi Inspector. It's a 2-mana 1/3. You can collect evidence 6. So you're not using this till late in the game or other things have died. But early it's a 1/3. Later on, it gets put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control and gain 2 life if you collected evidence. So I mean, it could be like a 2/4 for 2, and you gain 2 life, and it has reach. I don't know if you'd actually play that, but it's kind of one of the other things that are available. But realistically, you're probably trying to play some of the existing elves, probably play Voja and Tulsamir, and that's probably what the decks are going to look like more than anything else if you're doing that. But again, that's almost bringing in a whole new deck type. Deduce looks strong. I see. Okay. I was waiting to see like what does SGR mean? I was like what? Like I was so confused for a second. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Deduce. I don't even the card itself. Yeah, draw a card, investigate. I think the problem is we have so many good things already that are drawing and countering and whatever that while I think some cards are good, my question becomes, what do those things replace, right? We now have effectively 3 cards that cost 4 or 5 mana that look at either 4 or 5 of your top cards and give you some amount of value, right? One of them doesn't even get played at all right now. So now we're going to be splitting between the new ones, right? So it's like there's some cards that are very good and do some really cool things. I just don't know where they fit, I think is the issue. And some of it might just be a case of though they're there and we have to keep them in mind, waiting for a rotation to happen, right? Because whenever we get to that next level come October, but even then, between now and then, we still have what, 2 more sets, right? Because we'll have 3 more sets. by the time the next rotation happens. So we'll have even more cards to consider when that time comes, and we're only losing 1 year worth of cards. So it's tough. I think there are going to be just a lot of cases where some cards are going to be good and they're just not going to see a lot of play outside of very specific decks. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good that we have more options so you can build for adjusting metagames or for whatever style of deck you like to build. But also that if you do want to build a weird, quirky, whatever deck, there's a couple of cards there for you. As long as they're not often the rares or mythics, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think when there's a lot of commons and uncommons that are quirky and they don't really go anywhere, but then you find a home for them and it's a thing you like, it's cool that you get rewarded, and those tend to not be the more expensive cards. So that's not bad, really. I think it's okay. But yeah, it's going to be tough. I think there's even now there's a lot of cards like we're saying like, hey, all right, mono green's looking for some things, but it's what do those things look like in the end, right? How are we splitting those hairs? What creatures are we replacing? Do we still need to play a lot of stuff that removes enchantments? Are you able to just go over the top because the creatures are hard to deal with now, right? A lot of questions to still be asked to try to solve a lot of problems. So yeah, it's so far the set, I will say this, has a lot of good cards. It has a lot of stuff that leads to new deck types or completely adjusting current decks, right? Where you're talking about War Leader's Call, the big green thing with the ward of collect evidence, right? That some of those things do shift existing decks quite a bit. Possibly, as crazy as this sounds, elves were kind of on the cusp because you didn't have a lot of quality elves, especially at the top end. But now you might, like that might be a real thing. I don't know. Like we're gonna find out. But yeah, just lots of cool stuff that's available. So I'm feeling it. I'm into it. I think this will be a fun set to build with. I'll also say this. I think there's going to be a fair amount of value in this set. And I don't even mean just dollar wise. I think from a play perspective, but possibly because of that dollar wise, that we're gonna overlook in the beginning until they show up in a couple of decks, and everybody's gonna, oh, this card's way better than we thought it was, right? And you're gonna see some stuff take off in those first couple of weeks. And because there's no early access this time, that development or that discovery is going to take a lot longer, right? Because one of the things that happens with early access is you can go watch your favorite couple of creators. They go in there and we're all playing like 6, 8, 10 different decks throughout the day, right? So you're getting this like huge think tank experimentation bubble happening within like, a 12-hour window of time, depending on who you're watching. The problem is now, though, we're all kind of going to just have to do the research on our own. We're going to have to play the games on the ladder that are going to take longer and whatever. And you're just going to kind of get those videos doled out as we get them done over that first, let's call it 10 days or so, right? So the results of those experiments may not be realized for probably the better part of 2 weeks, whereas that might happen before in like 4 days. Standard is just so bloated right now, and it feels a lot like the interesting cards just disappear without seeing play. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think a lot of the cards that don't see play wouldn't see play otherwise. I think we always want to romanticize things and be like, oh, well, if these didn't exist, this card would be good. But it's like, would it really though? Like some things that are just on the fringes would always be on the fringes. And the reality is, I feel like we're seeing even more options and more variety among certain decks because more cards exist. Like even playing against mono red, I see different ones. Sometimes there's some focusing on the phoenixes and stuff or whatever, and the flyers. And then there's others that are just the hyper aggro trying to play like rage and things like that, right? If we didn't have all those cards, then like once we found a version of a deck, it would always just be the same. Hell, I've been playing against some mono red lately that are playing the 3 mana, steal a creature, and then if it hits you, they make a treasure or whatever. Like I've had that come up a couple times lately. So, those things wouldn't exist if we didn't have this whole selection of stuff. And the other reality too, and I understand why they did it, but as we move forward in paper for standard, is if cards are available longer, more people are inclined to buy into a standard deck, right? Like for example, I just bought some cards for a standard deck last week. I think this whole deck minus like 10 cards, 8 cards, are probably going to be standard legal even after the rotation. But throughout the course of the year, there'll be three more sets. I'm probably going to replace some number of those. So when my rotation happens in October, I'm maybe only replacing 8 cards, and I still get to play that deck for a whole other year as it is, and I get to keep adding to it. So if you have a favorite deck, it stays standard legal longer. And even on Arena, that means if you have a favorite deck, you don't have to spend that many wild cards, right? You replace 3 or 4 things, or you pick your favorites of the new stuff that's out, you add those to your deck, and that's it. If you're playing Boros aggro, you may not need a lot of cards from the new set, right? You might just decide, okay, I'm going to play a couple of copies of War Leader's Call, and maybe I'm going to play, I don't know, maybe we had a set of Lightning Helix. I don't know if the deck's needed or not, right? But there you go. You swap out a couple things, your deck's good to go. You probably don't have more than 2 different creatures rotating out, maybe 3, but they're all replaceable because they're mostly smaller creatures or whatever. So, I think that's the main reason they push for 3 years. But as far as do some cards get pushed out? Sure. There will be some number. Like we talked about before, there's some cards that are just redundant. You have options of 3 or 4 cards that do a similar thing. One of them will just be better than the other ones, which means whatever the bottom 1 or 2 are never going to see the light of day. Like, that's going to happen for sure. But there's other cards like, what is it? Vesuvian Duplimancy or whatever that card is, where like you target a thing and you make a copy or whatever. Like that card was just going to be mediocre regardless of what standard looks like. I've even seen people on my Discord, well, if these didn't exist, this card could be playable. It's like, no, it was bad before we went to 3 year standard. It just has to deal with another year's worth of cards making it worse. That's all. You know. So I don't think it changes as much as we think it does. Now, will that lead to some cases where you don't see as much variety? I would say yes, but I would almost say that's going to happen more on Arena than it probably will in paper. And mostly because in my personal experience, people building in paper, they are willing to spend and just get other physical cards and build whatever next deck they want to build. Or they have some variety they already own and they'll just build the next thing. On Arena, a lot of players tend to either be playing very casually, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. So they're not investing as much. Or for whatever reason, I think it's a little bit of a weird mindset, but I have talked to some players that are just like, nope, it's free. It's free. I'm never going to spend any money on it. If it's free to download, then I'm not spending any money. And I'm like, okay, well, that's your prerogative. But those people, once they build a deck, that's kind of the deck they're playing, and then maybe, 3 or 4 sets down the road, they might build something else or add to their current deck or whatever. But that's going to lead to there being more people online that are just playing the same stuff, right? I mean, I've genuinely played against some people that I can tell that they haven't upgraded to keep up with the times because they're playing like a card for card version, say of Mono Red from a year and a half ago, right? So you kind of know exactly when they built their deck or what list they copied or whatever. So that's definitely a thing that happens online more often. Now, I will say this. I don't get to tell anybody how to spend their money. So don't think that's what I'm trying to do here. But I will say I find the mentality very weird when people are willing to say, like, if it's free to play, it's always free to play. I'm not spending nothing. When some of those people, and again, this isn't all players, but some of those people I have followed, they'll say that, but then they're happy to go spend $50, $60 on a video game that they're done with in a week. They'll go spend a pile of money at the movies. They'll buy something for their room or office, whatever, that they don't even care about in 4 months. But even spending $10 or $20 on Arena is a crazy idea to them, right? That's just an odd mentality for me. Now, ultimately, we're all going to pick and choose where we spend our money, right? And we're going to spend it on the hobbies we want to spend our money on. And that's okay. Like again, I'm not telling anybody how to spend their money. I just think the argument is very strange. Where you're like, well, this game, I'm going to spend nothing on, even though I play it multiple hours a week and whatever, and I have played it and I'm going to continue to play it. But I'll go spend money on this other thing way more than I was planning on spending on Arena or whatever free-to-play game. And then I'm going to be done with it in 2 weeks. Like, don't get me wrong, there's something to be said for an experience. And if you think the experience is worth it, then cool. But to be like totally okay with that and think this is crazy that anybody would spend $20 for like, I don't know, the mastery pass or something. Kind of wild. But that is the thing. That's a mentality that's out there. But yeah, back to the point. I think cards in this set, and this is one of the things I do like, even though I would like to see sets be more than one set, so we can, like, even in this example, so we can get more stuff for like detectives and elves and goblins or whatever, right? Expand on that a little bit more, or at least have themes carry over to 2 or 3 sets would be good. Because like when we go to Thunder Junction, if there was more stuff that cared about, oh, Thunder Junction's gonna have a lot of treasure, isn't it? I just realized that because you're gonna do like the gold rush thing and all that. That makes sense. But if we had stuff that carried over, maybe caring about tokens, since that'd be a thing in the set, or investigate, or clues, I guess. Maybe we have clues for finding out where the gold is or something in the old west. I don't know. Like then you would make still room for more cards from this set to matter without having to be so on the nose, right? They don't have to be detectives and stuff. That's fine. Unless you maybe just make like one of the deputies also a detective or something, like fine, you can have one or two. But something that plays on those same themes, I think could be really good. That's why I like seeing reuse mechanics more than renaming mechanics, right? We could have done something else other than collect the evidence, right? We could have just called it the old mechanic or something that exile stuff from the yard and still take advantage. Maybe we didn't have anything. That's a bad example. We didn't have anything like that. But just saying, it's one of those things that where we can, I'd like to see reuse mechanics instead of new ones because unfortunately, some of those get abandoned. Good example being something like Kamigawa, where we had modified stuff or things that cared about modified, which is really just putting a thing on a card, right? Whether it's a enchantment or an equipment or a counter, whatever. But we didn't even reference it after the set. And it's like, well, that's a thing we could just have anytime, right? So why not make a card or two somewhere along the line that does it? And people who built decks using those mechanics or that care about those mechanics at least get a bone thrown their way every once in a while. And it doesn't disrupt the other set. Would have been fun. So just some things I think about from card design. Hi, Jorge. How's it going? Good to see you. You're coming in on the back end of like a 3-hour stream. Also, while I got a chance, please, if you haven't done so yet, please follow me, even if you don't subscribe on Twitch or on Facebook or whatever. If you're on YouTube, please hit the like button so people know that this was a fun stream and it shows up more for people. And if you'd be so kind to subscribe, there's rewards if you subscribe on YouTube and our memberships. You get access to help decide what's going to be in some of our videos on the channel. Sometimes I make stuff specifically that you request. Other times I even have a level that if you want deck help personally, it goes right to my email and we can have an exchange to help you build a better deck. So there is a lot of stuff offered and you get extra emotes and emojis and whatever you can use. Just lots of fun stuff whenever I am live and streaming. So there are some options there. So just saying, if you'd be so inclined, there are some things. What else we got going on here? Looks like we did have some follows. So I want to give some shout out to those, to Applesauce Boss, to Link in Red. That's a fun name there. Thank you for, who is that? Night Vision. Thank you for giving out a sub. That was cool. Sarah Buster, thank you. Weebo777, also for following. Ison333, Guadara73. So yeah, lots of fun stuff there going on. I want to just give shout outs to all those people too. So yeah, lots of stuff. But yeah, this set I think it's pretty cool. I Again, do I think it's super over the top, super crazy? No, I don't think it's that. I just think it's quality. I think it's going to at least give us a lot of ways to build. We're going to have a lot of things to think about. And I do think it's going to shake up the current decks. I do think that's a real thing. I think there's enough cards here. And again, we still have like a third of the set we haven't seen. But I think there's enough here from what we've seen to, one, make at least some new decks possible. I mean, off the top of my head, we can think about 3 or 4. Some decks get upgrades, like we're talking about mono green, we're talking about angels, things like that. At least get some new options and toys to play with. And then it's going to be a matter of how do some of the existing decks shift, right? Do the control decks want to go into more search cards? Are they playing more or less sweepers or counters? Do we find more artifacts or things we want to use in the creature decks to kind of circumvent some of that, right? There's going to be a lot of ways for standard to go. I think we're a long way from the finish line on being able to figure all this out. So yeah, I'm good with this. I think this was fun. We surprised myself on several of these cards. Also, like always, I mean, there's things that I'm not going to know, you're not going to know because we haven't seen the whole set. Obviously, there's going to be misinterpretations of things at first reading, so that's going to change things. So who the heck knows? But yeah, lots of options here for sure. I'm into this. Now, again, does the theme do a lot for me? Not particularly. And this is coming from a guy that actually helped write and participate in a murder mystery once upon a time. But realistically, it's fine. I mean, I'm okay with them trying new things. There's people that are way into that. Same way there's going to be people next that they're going to be like, Westerns, whatever. Like, it's fine. Some people are going to like what they like, but it's about getting fun cards. And I think we got several fun and interesting cards, and I'm good with that. I don't really care what the theme is. We get more cool stuff to play with. That's all I'm about. But yeah, looks like I don't even know how many likes we've gotten on the YouTube video. 37 likes. All right. I was hoping more of y'all would hit the like button, but hey, 37 still a lot. That helps. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for me, y'all. I'm going to grab something to drink, grab a snack. I have a fun video I want to finish editing, so y'all have something to watch tomorrow. Lore Collectibles just got here and says, I just popped in to say I love the content and glad Magic picked you up as a creator for the channel. Yeah, I'd actually done stuff for them in the beginning when they were first building that channel. And then they went hard on doing a lot of stuff with CGB, Ash Lizzle, and LVD. And they were kind of like the only three they were really working with for a minute. And it looks like they're rotating some other people in. So I don't know how often I'm going to be on that channel. It was just fun to get to do a thing. We'll see if they come back and want to work with me again. But either way, fun stuff all around. This was a fun stream. I'm glad y'all came and hung out, because this was like just spur of the moment. I hadn't reviewed any of the cards yet. I think the full set list goes live on Thursday, either Thursday or Friday this week. So we should know all the cards by the end of the week. So we may do a follow-up stream then to cover everything from January 21st until the release date and, fill in all the gaps there. So we may do a follow-up stream then too, which would probably be shorter than this one because I think we just talked about 2/3 of the cards in set. There are only about 1/3 left to go. So yeah. Anyway, wherever you're watching, whenever you're watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, because I know some of y'all are from all over the place. Remember to take care of yourselves and your family. Remember to be awesome, and most importantly, be awesome to each other.